Can bad choices be changed by like a good choice? The moment I stepped on set and saw how it was made, I said, this is me. I have to do this. You have to think about all the things that can go wrong because your life could be at stake. But in stunts, I found that it was more often than not full commitment to whatever it was I was doing, mentally and physically, was the best result. Attack the ground. Financial freedom is not the ability to do nothing.
Yeah.
Because then what example are you setting for your kids?
Yeah.
So money allows you to be lazy? Like that's not the goal. That's not the lesson we're trying to learn here. It's like work hard, but then work smart, which is let your money work for you as well.
This is the Better Life Podcast with Brandon Turner and
Cam Cathcart.
Dude, we just got done filming the longest podcast we've ever done.
And it was amazing.
It was amazing. I'm not kidding. I know I say this a lot. This is one of my favorite episodes. I mean, top 5, maybe top 1 of all 600 plus episodes of podcasts that I've filmed in a decade. This was super fun because we cover so much stuff.
We cover
everything.
So much, and it's interesting.
Yeah.
And I think like just the person that we interview is crushing it on all levels of life as a dad in the business sector and real estate
investing, all sorts. So our guest today is Sam Hargrave. Sam is a world-renowned movie director, stuntman, stunt coordinator. He's been in everything. You've seen it. You've seen him, even though you didn't know it was him, because he's Captain America, for example. Like he's the stunt guy for Chris Evans and like all this crazy stuff, right? So, but he's also a real estate investor. We talk about that. We talk about the way AI is just and technology is changing the industry from both like any industry. We talk about leadership, parenting.
I think I loved where we just talked about the power of belief.
Yeah.
And what that can do.
Yeah, that was wild. I think we spent 30 minutes on that question of what pivot books do you read? Because what did you say, 180 books you read last year? Yeah, 180 some books you read. Like wild, very well-spoken, well-read, intelligent conversation from Sam. And then you and I were there too.
Yeah, exactly.
Dude, it was wild. It was so good. I can't wait for you guys to listen to this. I know it's a long episode. You listen to it in parts if you have to, but listen to this whole thing. It just gets better and better and better. You guys are going to love it. So with that said, let's jump into the interview with Sam Hargrave. This episode is brought to you by our friends at TurboTenant and Ballpoint Marketing. These two companies are big supporters of the show, and they know how to work with real estate investors and help real estate investors grow their businesses. So be sure to stay tuned to hear how you can get discounts and free stuff from them both. And as you probably know, all the profits from the show go to charities of the guest choosing. So when you listen to the sponsors on the show and you work with these hand-chosen by me sponsors, you're actually doing good for the world. Now let's get to the show. Sam Hargrave, welcome to the podcast, man.
Thanks for having me.
Dude, I'm so pumped. So I'll tell you a little bit. I saw you followed me one time on Instagram. I thought you were following me and you commented on something. And I'm like, oh, you got the little blue check mark, whatever. So I would check you out. And I'm like, holy crap, like this guy is like a big deal. Like he's a big deal. And so I thought, like, I gotta get that on the guy on the podcast someday. And to find out you're a real estate investor, super cool. So here's what I know about you. I know you're you've directed a few of Netflix's most popular movies like of all time. We'll talk about that. Extraction, Chris Hemsworth, incredible movies, by the way. I really enjoyed them.
That.
I know you were a stuntman, and not just a stuntman, but like I think the word Cam used earlier was a god of the stuntman world.
Yes.
Oh dear.
It's what one of my friends told me.
Yeah. Apparently you have a reputation as like the stunt guy, and you worked on things like Avengers, Hunger Games, Suicide Squad. I know you were a husband of one and father of one. Pretty exciting.
So far as I know.
Yeah. And on top of all of that, you're a guitar player, a singer, a songwriter, and a real estate investor. You do a lot.
No, I appreciate it. I mean, life is to be lived, and I try to squeeze in as much as I can. It's a whole lot of fun.
Dude, I love it. So take us back before all that. Before Sam Hargrave, the celebrity stuntman, real estate investor, author, writer, speaker, whatever you do. You do all the stuff. Who was Sam Hargrave?
That is a great question. Who was Sam Hargrave? Who is Sam Hargrave? I think who Sam Hargrave was has led to who Sam Hargrave is. And I grew up in North Carolina on an 80-acre horse farm. It was, my parents who are still together to this day. Great inspiration to me and my relationship. But then I had an older sister named Jessie and younger brother named Daniel. And it was the three of us. And we just had it depends on who you ask. From our point of view, it was an idyllic childhood. We had 80 acres to run and play with. There was a river running through the property. There was open pastures, woods. We would, leave the house in the morning and not come back until the sun, went down. And I went to, after the second grade, I was homeschooled because my mom, felt like, and to her credit, she could probably do a better job with our education than the public school system. And I think she was right, because what I learned from her and through homeschooling was a love of learning and how to get information through books, through the internet wasn't a thing back then, aging myself, but through libraries, through, encyclopedias, finding information was a big part of our learning. And then also learning at your own pace. And I remember times I would disappear into the woods with a book and just be gone, as I say, for days, but I'd come back at night, but then back out. And that was the schoolwork that I did for that time, because we had a system set up where you had a certain number of things you had to accomplish at a certain time, and there was a testing and you had to pass each month. But how you got there was completely up to you. It was self-managing your time. And I learned that from my mom, and she was great at it. And she would let me write poetry and books, remind me subtly sometimes not so subtly, like, this test is coming up on this day. And I'm like, I got it. And I liked to take one thing and fully absorb myself in it and just get lost in it, which I would do with books or poetry. And then when I have to shift back to the, whatever it was, social studies, science, I get into that. But so the homeschooling experience for me was incredible. You ask some people from the outside, they're like, who are these weirdos? And like no socialization and that was a challenge. But we went, we had different outlets through our church group, through our, sports that we would play. Like my dad put us in baseball and basketball. We had a lot of opportunities to interact with other humans. But the thing I remember most about the homeschool experience was the freedom to learn at our pace and express ourselves in our own unique way. And so that was really important to, I think, who I became, over the course of my life. That foundation was really strong.
How do you homeschool without your kids turning out weird? Like, how should somebody?
We're homeschooling ours.
Yeah,
we're all homeschooling.
Well,
ours, yeah.
I think my mom would probably be the best person to ask. And I don't know. I think I'm actually pretty weird. So I don't know if you could say, how do you make without becoming weird? And I think that's such an interesting topic, or even a concept of weird, normal. What is like, you are you, and there's different ways to get there. There's the normal is 9 to 5 job. Like you're not normal. You're not normal because you guys are entrepreneurs. You have a different way of thinking. And most people would look at that and be like, what's wrong with you?
Yeah.
And the same goes for schooling. The norm is show up at this place at this time, your backpack and learn for what is this, 7-8 hours a day, these young kids. That's normal in society, but what does that produce? A bunch of people that do the same thing, go 9 to 5. And so I think we're not trying to produce normal people. We're trying to produce the best version of the human that's in that husk that we can. And I think homeschool gives you the opportunity to have the flexibility to adapt to the learning style of that child. And I think because my brother, my sister, and I all learned differently, and we all became very different things. I mean, my brother's now in the business as well. My sister, trains horses, like she's an equestrian. My brother played professional baseball, and I went off to Hollywood and did movies. So very different career paths. Like I said, my brother now joined me, smart guy. And he's great.
Joined you in like real estate stuff?
No, I'm still working on
stuff?
that. I think he's coming around. But Hollywood stuff.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah, he came over to the fold in 2014, and his rise has been, meteoric. Like if I, quickly ascended to the upper echelon of the stunt world, his was, far surpassed me. And maybe that's why I didn't ask him to do it sooner, because I knew he was stronger, faster, better looking than me, and he would always be better at whatever we did. So I was like, oh, let me do this for a while and make myself unique. But back to the kind of question or topic of, your kids not being weird. I think we should not be afraid of our kids being, quote, weird, meaning being who they are. Like, and there's a great concept of, rather than us forming kids, they're like this blank slate and we're, bending and molding them like clay. It's like who they are is in there. It's our job to kind of step back and allow that to grow and blossom. And it's like what my wife and I are trying to do with our young daughter. I mean, she's not in school yet, but she's learning. Like, we're teaching her sign language, and she sits down. She spends more time, reading or looking at books than she does. She has yet to, have any kind of screen time other than FaceTime with family.
That's great.
Like that's an important thing for us is family and connection. And so, at mealtimes, she'll sit down and because with her grandparents or my parents who are further away, we put up the FaceTime. And now we're okay with that because it's not fast cuts. You're not trying to promote anything. It's actual interaction with a human being happens to be on a screen, but it's genuine. It's in the moment. It's not edited, pre-edited. You're not trying to show them what to do. They're just reacting spontaneously. And so we're trying to just give her a bunch of space to become who, Ronan is, rather than say, you're going to do this, you're going to do that, and try to mold her into who we want her to be.
It's a beautiful answer, man. That's good.
It is fascinating. And I'd be interested in your take on this with being a director, of some of the biggest movies, most streamed movies of all time. And like your relationship with screens and for your kids with screens and like even what you just said, like the fast cuts, like your job is to make people like
addicted to it.
Like, how are you going to raise your kids in that? How are you?
That's a great question and something that I have thought about a lot recently. Having a kid changes everything. Don't let anybody tell you otherwise. And for me, for the better. And it's made me examine my life in a way of what is my purpose and what am I doing? Because I have spent most of my adult life and career promoting, because I make these movies, violence. Just say it. It's a fact. It's these movies that it's entertainment for adults, but then you think about, kids might be watching these shows.
Yeah.
And I don't think there's nothing wrong with it because everything has its time and place, and there's nothing necessarily wrong with the adults consuming entertainment that has some violent themes. I don't think. But you can't deny the impact that it does have on society and that it definitely has on children. So I've started to rethink some of the choices that I make for the movies I direct. And I'm not saying I won't direct action movies or that there won't be weapons or whatnot, but I do want the characters that I direct and that are portrayed in these movies to have just great values that you can, because movies inspire people. Like that platform, if you think about, if you take an Extraction movie, for example, and the number of people that streamed that movie like in 30 days, it's staggering. It was like, I think it was over 100 million households, not people, like 100 million households streamed that movie.
That was one of them.
Me too.
I appreciate that. Thank you very much. That's
and Extraction too, both of them.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that. And you think about the impact you can have with that far-reaching, medium. It's what I mean. Started to think about, wow, what goes up there is important. What I'm saying is important. And so, as violent as those movies are, what we're trying to thematically get at is that, or the question: can a life of can bad choices be changed by like a good choice? Can the steps you take moving forward from now? Because you can't change the past. But moving forward from now, can you be a different person? And I think that's a pretty impactful thing to think about because we all have, past, we've all made choices, good, bad, or otherwise. But from right now, moving forward, how do you choose to be? Who do you choose to be? How do you choose to act? And that was kind of what we were getting at in the thematics of those movies. But to circle around to the impact of it, I want to now, there's movies I'm going after, ones a little more PG-13, because I do want to leave a legacy behind in the film world that my daughter can consume and be proud of, not just, the accolades or the views or like, oh, that was amazing. It was an amazing stunt sequence. That's cool. But what was the movie trying to say? What was the voice behind it, that Sam Hargrave's voice? What is he trying to say? And what legacy did he leave in the entertainment industry? And it makes you think about it. So there's a lot of internalization. Having a child makes you think about what are you going to leave behind?
Yeah.
There's an episode of a podcast called the Hardcore History Podcast. Have you heard of that one?
I have not, but
super good. Every episode, there's only maybe 30 episodes in like 10 years because each one's like 6 hours long. It's the craziest show. And this guy just goes so nerdy deep on like historical topics. And it's called Hardcore History. So it's real dark stuff.
Yeah.
But one of the episodes is on public executions. And it's hours and hours of public execution conversation. And he makes this really interesting point in this. He says, all of human history, as far back as we can go, humans watched humans die for fun. That has always been a thing that we have done. It stopped about 1920, 1930. Why? Because movies were invented. We still watch people die.
Wow.
There's something in our soul that needs to watch. And this is it's the weirdest thing, but there's something especially in a men's soul, but it's just humans in general, has to have an outlet to watch people die. We just now we fake it. And so we get that piece of our soul fulfilled. And it's weird, but it's true.
You're welcome.
Yeah, exactly. So I'm just saying, if you do action movies, they serve some kind of purpose. And I don't know why we have that. That book I was just telling you about this morning, I was reading the way of the superior man.
Yep.
There's a chapter in that book where he talks about like how women or the feminine nature needs the man to be a killer. And a man needs to be a killer and a murderer, like at its core.
Well, that wasn't that Jordan Peterson who said, like, you know, you need to be dangerous.
Yeah.
He's like, but you should be dangerous. There's nothing like I shouldn't impress. He's gonna watch this and be like, that's a terrible impression of me. I don't sound like that in my mind.
Sounds a little bit like
Thanks,
that.
Jordan. And I do voices, and I apologize. It's part of my growing up in the entertainment business. A parrot.
I thought you were gonna say homeschooled.
Yeah. Oh boy. I'll do an impression of you guys later. No,
please.
What was my point? Oh, the man has to be dangerous, have the capability to be a killer, to be a murderer, and then the choice to not act that way. That is what makes a man like different.
Yeah.
Or good. It's like not being like, it was like the difference between like a rabbit, or a wolf is like you're choosing to not act in this dangerous way, but you have the potential. And I think that would be, I would agree with you. I think that's an important aspect. And you're doing jujitsu, you're becoming a dangerous man.
Well, actually, last night, so I'm sitting on the couch last night, and my daughter Rosie is, bored, which is great for kids. I try to make her bored as much as possible. And so she's making a trap in the kitchen, and she got this long, like, piece of string or like whatever, and she ties it one part to the table, another part to a book that she's put some heavy object on it. And she's like, if somebody walks through here, it'll fall off in the middle of the night and it'll make a big noise. And she probably worked on it for 45 minutes while I'm just reading a book and she's doing that. And she finally gets it working the way she wants to, and she tests it, and the thing falls over, and she's really excited. And she's like, now we can know if somebody breaks in the house. And she goes, but Dad, what are we going to do if we hear that in the middle of the night? And I was like, I'll tell you what we're going to do. I'm going to get up and I'm going to beat the living crap out of that person. Yeah. I'm going to wrestle them down. I'm going to take them, tie them up, and throw them out of the house into the pool. And she was so like happy to hear that. Yeah. I was like, oh, Dad's violent. Like, Dad's violent when he needs to be. It was like that dangerous thing. She was like, oh, Dad's dangerous. And I like that. Like, I need that.
Well, I think we do. It's societal. You need your protectors.
Yeah.
Because not everybody can be, the sheep need a shepherd, or a sheepdog to protect them. And I think it's not everybody. Not everybody's an alpha. Not everybody's a beta. It's like just the balance, right? Yeah. But to have that ability, I think is very interesting. And so that could be the plus side of action movies.
Yeah.
And for those who aren't that, or who it's not in their way on this planet, it's like a way to, or an opportunity to live vicariously through those who are, and say like, yeah, that's an aspect of myself that either I don't want to tap into, or that has been lost, or whatever. But so action movies can be great wish fulfillment. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. All right. So let's get into your story back. So you graduate high school at some point. Do you go to college? How did you become a stuntman?
Yeah. Well, I didn't actually go to school. I was homeschooled from second grade until I was 16. I got like an equivalency degree. And then I started taking community college courses. And then from there, I transferred to a 4-year school at UNC Chapel Hill and studied film there. And what I left out was in the middle of that kind of a big, part of this inspiration was I got into martial arts. So my sister was taking night classes at this community college. My mom said, you're taking night classes, you need some form of self-defense. And she was like, fine, I'll do it. And at 16, the attitude, that was my impression of my sister without the beard. But she so she agreed to it. My mom searched around, found the best place. Best place. It was like a, Taekwondo school and down the block. And she paid for this Christmas special, 10 classes, this rate, and she bought it. And then my sister's like, I'm not going to be caught dead in those pajamas. Like, forget that. And my mom's like, well, I've paid for these classes. Someone's going to attend. And I was like, well, I'll do it. Because I was watching Hercules, The Legendary Journeys, and Xena. And I was like, all the crazy, terrible fighting. No offense, Zoe and company who did that stuff. But it was, by today's standards, pretty bad. So, but I saw it and I loved it. So I went. And after the first class, I was 100% hooked. It was the discipline, the ability to, that outlet for aggression, like you're punching things, you're kicking things, but at 14 years old. But you also have if you mess up, to like do push-ups, and like, oh my gosh, do push-ups, you feel like strong. And it was a really incredible turning point for me. And I pursued that wholeheartedly. I dove in, found every Bruce Lee book that I could consume, every Jackie Chan movie. It just became my life. And I was fully obsessed with martial arts. And I had I think I mentioned before, like my version of learning was to tunnel vision. Like I would get into this thing and that was it. And so I didn't really realize, I didn't step back and say, oh, this obsession with martial arts, there's other avenues that you could tie this to that can make a career out of. So I go into the school, and my mom, she's the wise one. She's like, what if you'd study like film classes? And I was like, oh, film classes, good idea. So I start studying film classes. I get an opportunity to intern on a local film that's being made by, of all people, my Taekwondo instructor, Donald Whittier. He would be an interesting person to to interview on the podcast, because an entrepreneur, like the more I learn, the older I get and the more I learn about him now, the more impressed I am with kind of what the things he did. Like he was in real estate, like a real estate investor, which allowed him to then kind of pursue what he wanted, which was teaching martial arts and traveling, movies.
That's awesome.
Yeah. So it was, and I didn't know at the time all this was happening. Retrospectively, we talk about this stuff. He's got all kinds of, real estate investments. But so through martial arts, I met him. He introduced me to movies as far as working on them. So he had an independent film that he had written or co-written and directed. He was producing. And so I got to be an intern. And the moment I stepped on set and saw how it was made, I said, this is me. I have to do this. It just, that moment when it clicks, where for you, real estate investor or whatever it is, that was like the moment for me where this makes sense. All of my tumbling around martial arts, all the, taking my little Playmobil toys and setting up scenes and dioramas and being like, this is what I want to, show people. It all just made sense. So then film classes, which led to, again, I just get myopic on my point of view, and I would just wanted to be Jackie Chan. I was going to write, direct, stunts, act, all of it. Just going to make movies. And then a good friend of mine, Thayer Harris, who I usually would pull into these escapades of ours, whether it was jackass things or, these fight scenes. And he was the one who said, you're pretty good at falling on your head. There is a career out there where that could be your focus. It's called a stuntman. I was like, well, yeah, stuntman. I do that on, he's like, no, but like Hollywood, professional, like that's all you do. You get paid for it. And I was like, that's a good idea. So I did. After it was it, I just packed up my Honda Civic, drove across the country, and when I graduated, and started sleeping on couches. People that I had met through that internship I was 16 when that happened. So when 21, I'd kept those relationships. There was a camera operator named Ad Santel, who was the DP of that show. And I slept on his couch for like 3 weeks while I would just go to gyms and studios and knocking on doors saying, I want to be a stuntman. How do you become a stuntman? How do you become a stuntman? And I made a living, which is really crazy to think about. I paid the bills by teaching martial arts to kids after school and being Spider-Man on Hollywood Boulevard.
Really?
Yeah.
So you were there.
And for birthday parties, I would just dress up in this. I bought a costume at the Halloween shop, and I would, my thing on Hollywood Boulevard was I'll flip for a tip, and you'd have like a rubber band with like $1 underneath, and you just kind of like flip it over, and you're like, I'll flip for a tip, and the best were the tourists who come from out of country and they don't know the difference, because American money is really weird. You get like, it's all the same color, same size, ones and zeros. And, sometimes they would be like, want to give you a 1, but they're like pulled out and it's 100, and you'd be like, hey, I'll keep flipping for those tips. Keep them coming. But yeah, so paying the bills by being Spider-Man on Hollywood Boulevard, teaching martial arts to kids, and then knocking on doors saying, how do I become a stuntman? And then so the first big job was doubling Jensen Ackles on the pilot episode of Supernatural. So that was the first union gig. I looked similar to the guy before the beard and had the skill set that the team needed. And, that was the big job. And then the project that kind of catapulted me into the conversation of the stunt world was Pirates of the Caribbean 2 and 3. They were shooting the scene in the Singapore bathhouse, and they needed hundreds of stunt people. Like the who's who in the stunt community showed up at Universal Studios, and it was, we were there for 4 or 5 weeks. And in that environment, I got to perform, and it was stunt coordinators, stunt performers, everybody was there. And so people who then could hire you for other jobs could see you perform. They watched like, oh, this guy he falls down pretty good. He gets back up and does it again. He can hit his mark. And so out of that, calls would come in and say like, hey, I got this project. You want to come do this? And so it's really a reputation-based business. And so through doing that project, getting an opportunity, and then kind of stepping up to the plate and throwing down, so to speak, that it started a snowball and leads to the rest of the career.
What is the secret to being a great, successful stuntman in Hollywood?
The secret to being, there's 2 different questions there, because I think to be a successful stuntman in Hollywood, you don't have to be great, which is kind of interesting. But I'll answer the first one, the great part. I think to be a great stunt performer, you need to understand multiple levels of the business, not just your art, which is, falling down and fighting and all this, the many aspects to stunt performing. But if you step outside of that and go deeper, you're a filmmaker. So you need to understand how the character moves. What's the character's motivation? Because if you're doubling someone, you are that character as much as the actor when on screen. So you have to portray that person. And, you have to study movement, study acting, I think. Not everyone does, but I think it's very important. The difference between the good ones and the great ones is when it happens on you watch an Avengers movie and you kind of can't tell where Chris Evans begins and, Sam Hargrave ends. That to me is a successful stunt performer and a great one who the audience isn't knowing the difference. It's just the character of Captain America is being portrayed, and you work with the actor and then understanding lenses so that you're not killing yourself when they're on like a 135 and on the actor like this, and you're falling downstairs in the background. It's like, they can't see you.
Yeah.
But if they've got a 24 and they're very wide, you better bring your A game and go big and sell the performance. So the understanding of the process, understanding working well with others. Like you have to work with costume, because so many times you show up and you're like, like I'm supposed to do a flip and I can't lift my arms. How do you communicate that in a way that doesn't, distance that person from you or alienate them? You can't just rock up and say, this costume sucks, I can't work like this. You go, hey, this is a great costume. It looks amazing. It's built to look great. And we need to make it functional. So what if we were to put some gussets in there and like maybe this, instead of being like hard shell, we could make it rubber and soft so it could flex, but you wouldn't know the difference. And people start working with you and say, oh, he's a team player. He understands the process. What I'm trying to do, you're not trying to poo-poo anybody's job. You're saying, I love what you do. Let's integrate it into what I'm trying to do. And say, like, shoes is always a big thing for stunt performers, because they'll make boots for these superheroes that are big and clunky and look awesome, but are just super impractical for running and flipping and jumping. So then you have to start working with costume and go, how can we make a boot that looks how you want it to look, which is great, but works for what I have to do, which is be light and nimble and flip around. And so you just have to work well with others. And then, just be, I think you get there, show up early and stay late, like put in the work. So putting in the work, knowing the other sides of the business and then working well with others, those, I think, what separates the goods from the greats. Yeah. And then successful, it's networking. It's really about, who you know and your reputation based. And then it's just trying to work with as many people as possible and learn as much as you can. And then just keep going, just keep learning.
What I love about that answer is, and people might be listening and going, well, I don't want to be a stuntman. Why do I care about that answer? But I would encourage people to go back and rewind the last 3 minutes or 4 minutes and just replace the word stuntman with entrepreneur. In every single thing you said there, it applies to all business, like how we relate with people and knowing your craft. It's the E-Myth 101. It's like Michael Gerber, you can bake a cake, but you can't run a bakery.
Yep.
So know your craft, yes, but also know the business side of the craft. And then it's a people game.
And that's what transitions, like how I went from stuntman to director. I'm not saying that was the next question you were going to ask.
I was the next question.
But that transition is very similar to working in your business.
Yeah.
And then working on a business. Because then once you performing, you rock up and you do your best work and you sling your pads, and when you're done, you go, see ya, and you go home to your hotel room and work out or whatever. When you're the boss, you're having to deliver a budget. You have to communicate with all departments. You have to bring in your project, which is your movie, under budget. I mean, you don't have to, but you get the next job faster if you do.
Yeah.
And so you're communicating with people, and you take all those skills that Ed mentioned is for the great stunt performer, and you're now scaling that and just saying, all right, how do I utilize these skills that I've learned to run the business side of my department? Now, then it scales even bigger once you go from stunt performer, you got one job, you're performing, stunt coordinator. Now you've got all the different stunt performers that you're having do stuff. You're designing creatively. Then you go second unit director. Now you're designing and directing the action, saying, put the camera here, communicating with the stunt coordinator. And now you're to the director. Now you are in charge of that's being the ship's captain. You're not, it's a very strenuous job. And I think it's the biggest thing I was hit with was decision fatigue.
Oh yeah.
Because as a stunt coordinator, it was a lot. Your people's lives are literally in your hands, and that's a lot of pressure. But that's one department out of dozens. So then now you're directing, and you show up, and now you got the stunt performers and the stunt director, stunt coordinators have questions. So does costume, special effects, visual effects. The producers, writers, actors, everyone has questions, and they look to you for answers. And sometimes you might not know the answers. You just might not have thought about something, or you might have thought about it and you rethink and you go, this actually is a better way to do this. So the important thing is to for me, directing was the realization that my job is to answer questions so that other people can do their jobs to make my project the best that it can be.
Mm-hmm.
So communication becomes, whether you're an entrepreneur or a filmmaker, the most important element of the ingredients that we have to work with, in my opinion. Because if you can't communicate what you need from others, they can't give you what it is that you want. And then you can't, if you I might have this great idea for an action sequence, but if I'm unable to communicate that, it's just an idea in my head. It's not realized as a great sequence on film.
So as a director, you are the head honcho. Everybody's answering to you.
In film, it's very interesting. I just did a TV show for Apple recently, and it's a different structure. In film, the director is kind of the lead man, the head honcho. They look to you for answers. In television, it's the writer, showrunner. So the person that creates the idea, they stay with the project from start to finish, and they're the North Star creatively. Whereas generally speaking, in film, the writer writes it, gives it to the director, and then now you've passed it off. The writer can be there and help, but the director says, "Hey, here's how we're going to make this come alive." And you're never so interesting. I'm sure you think like, or other people go, "Oh, you own all these units, and now like you're in charge, and like everything you say goes." You always answer to someone.
Yeah.
Like you're never, unless you are. Well, then you answer to the shareholders. Like there's always interaction with other people. That's why communication is so important. Because I always thought, as the director, I get the final say. No, you don't.
Yeah.
You get a say, and then the producers are going to have a say. The studio's going to have a say.
The actors, I'm sure.
Actors going to have a say, and now you have to go like, oh, okay, we have to work together because it's one of the most collaborative, creative mediums out there. I'm not an artist saying that is what I want the painting to look like. It's like, this is what I want it to look like. I can't do it. I literally can't do it alone. I have to have you, other people, other departments help me. How can we do this together? Everyone's going to have an opinion. You have to then work within the system of what it is you want. You create here's the vision. Now, how do I get you what you want that makes you happy and satisfied while still servicing what I want? But you're going to have an opinion too. How do I make you happy? Now, at a certain point, you have to draw the line and say, this is my vision.
Yeah.
And you might not be happy now. You will later because I see the big picture. But you compromise at another place, and maybe in this other scene you can do that idea you had, which is whatever. Take your glasses off and twirl them. It's like it doesn't fit here because he's thinking something different. And that's again the thing that people don't realize. I think as a director is the actors come with a lot of great ideas. Producers do too. Everyone is focusing on their job to be the best of what they can do. You as the director have to take the 10,000 foot view, like a investor or running a syndication. What is the overall start to finish big picture goal for the company, for the film, and keep that in mind within the moment to moment of the business. And that becomes very challenging.
So how did you then, because it's insane to me as a director, especially with like movies like Extraction and whatnot that are hundreds of millions of dollars of budget. You've got, I don't know how many people answering to you. How did you, and you're young still for the director in the director world, how did you develop the leadership style and just become a leader to be able to do that? Because I've got, with Deal Flow in Revel City, 25, 30 people that I oversee, and it makes me sick to my stomach. So I can't imagine.
I grew a beard.
You grew a beard?
Yes. Well, I mean, just quick aside, quick fun story, is the beard, because of my age, the beard actually was a tool. There's two reasons for me growing the beard, but one was a tool for people to respect me. Because when I was younger, and still now, if I shaved right now, you wouldn't recognize me. And it's a really fun thing to do. And you haven't done it in a while. But it would go from, because in between roles, they'd always tell you as a stunt performer, just let it grow. Because like it's easier to chip away at the statue than it is to put it on. It's a lot less comfortable to wear a fake beard and a wig than it is for them to have the hair. So I'd grow it in between projects. But I found that as soon as I would shave, people would just treat you a little differently. And interesting, it's the crazy thing of appearance. And I think there was you put on your Instagram about, does appearance matter?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Whether you want it to or not, it does. Meaning like when I would rock up to on a set as a stunt coordinator, 28 years old, clean shaven, people would kind of look at you and go, you sure?
Yeah.
Grow the beard and they go, okay, great. What do you want to do? Because I don't know what it is in the human mind that the beard, I think it might just be the old wisdom, just maybe it's biblical. I don't know.
Yeah.
It's old. Like people with beards are wiser.
Yeah, there's something ingrained in our like biology inside of it, I think that you respect people with beards more, at least in the Western civilization.
Yeah, and I'm not saying it's right or wrong, good or bad. It just kind of is. And maybe it's because as a kid, you can't grow a beard. And then once you can, and it does, this person is biologically of an age where they've survived. They must know something. I don't know if I'm younger. I don't know the truth about that. But the funny thing, and I've done this a couple of times, being young with a beard, is that you grow the beard, you know me. If I went outside, shaved the beard, came back in, the look in people's eyes as you see them searching, they know something about you is familiar. They're like, I have seen, oh my gosh, you're Sam. It happens. And it's a really funny thing to do. So
Cam walked into my house last night. I saw Cam come out of the driveway. He came up, we did a sauna last night, and he came up my driveway, and I'm looking at him, I'm like, there's something different. I don't know what it is. I'm like, oh yeah, you don't have your
shape.
It's like, I know you. And I totally screwed up your question. The answer to how to growing into that position of leading people, I think it's just doing it. Like you're never gonna, I made all kinds of mistakes as a stunt coordinator. Luckily no one died. And so those, mistakes were learning for me, not, career ending. So in business, you've got to do it. And the hard part, and here's the really hard part, the catch-22 of someone giving you the opportunity, and so you can make your mistakes, and no one trusting you to give you that opportunity because you don't have the experience. It's like, how do you get experience without getting opportunities, and how do you get opportunities without experience? So for me, it was those who came before being willing to trust me enough to give me an opportunity. So always super grateful for those that gave me those opportunities. And then you take advantage of them, but don't be afraid to try stuff and learn and make mistakes. And you will. But I think the thing that has helped me the most was the education, becoming a person who people are willing to follow. So when you become the leader, people will follow you. That question gets asked to me a lot. How do I become the guy? Or how do I become the girl? How do I become the person? I can't really tell you how, but I know you have to do the work, and then it will become apparent that you're the person, and people will just follow you. It's kind of a vague answer, but I do believe it comes from knowing yourself, studying outside of your field, just becoming knowledgeable in human behavior, in different kinds of human interactions. Psychology is great, but every one of these books would help you become that person who then has the confidence to step out with a plan, and people will just follow you. It's a hard line to draw and say that makes you a leader. But it does happen kind of naturally. You start doing all these things, and you'll suddenly realize, oh wow, I'm out in front and people are following me. And to be from the back and say, how do I lead? It's tough. It's a tough question to answer.
It kind of reminds me a bit of what Andrea Fawcett said when she was on the podcast. We interviewed her. She lives out here in Maui, and during the fires, she tells this great story where she's like, there was nobody in charge, and everything was just chaos. And so she just gave herself a title of whatever it was, equipment coordinator, and just started telling people, I'm the coordinator. And everyone will follow. And people followed because somebody stepped up. And so a lot of leadership, I think, is just stepping up and just saying, I'm going to lead.
100%. And that reminds me, that is kind of how with stunt, in the Marvel universe, I was a stunt double. And there were times when, and I was always paying attention and learning, and I was always there, ready to help. And it was like a team effort. All I saw was the boss. Every time, my opinion is the film ultimately is the boss. So whatever best services the project is what needs to be done. And if I'm the stunt person and I see something that needs to be done that it's a delicate balance, but is outside of my lane per se, but that I can help with, and I know I was always the kind of person that was just going to do it.
Yeah.
As opposed to being like, well, that's not my job. I do this. This is what I do. And I got in trouble a lot for that. I would overstep bounds constantly, and I'd get yelled at. I've just lots of experiences of me just doing what I thought was right, and I knew how to do it. It wasn't my job, but I would do it, and I'd get in trouble for it. But then I switched at one point, and I was like, well, gosh, I changed this mentality, and I just say, well, it's not my movie, it's not my job, and then you just take care of it. And that just destroyed my soul. Yeah. It was not who I was. And so I just started changing it and say, hey, you know what? I know it's not my job, and I'm not trying to step on your toes. I'm not trying to tell you how to do your job. I'm serving the greater master, which is the film. And I believe I can help here, and I'm going to help. If you don't like it, tell me and I'll back away, but I'm going to support you in this as much as I can. So there were times when, the story you told, there's the gap and no one's stepping up to fill it. And you just step in, fill the gap. And then you become, oh, Cam stepped up. Cam filled that gap. He has the ability to lead. You're not waiting to be told what to do. You're stepping up and you're filling the gap that needs to be filled just instinctively.
Yeah. There's a great book. It's called How to Lead When You're Not in Charge. And that's the entire premise of it, where it's when there's a gap to be filled, stepping up, even though it might not be your role, it might not be your job, stepping up and filling that. And there's so many people that sit on the sidelines and they wait for the opportunity instead of stepping up and filling that gap. And they're always going to be on the sidelines.
That's I got to get that book. Sounds amazing.
It's a pastor. His name, I think Clay Scroggins, I believe is his name, but it's a great book.
Afterwards, you write that down. And that also reminds me of another great book, and it's highly recommend. I think it's Covey. I think it's The Sun, but Trust and Inspire Leadership.
Okay.
If you haven't, oh my gosh, it's the difference between trust and inspire leadership, between command and control.
Yeah.
So it's kind of like an old school, new school style, but you find even old school, the great leaders usually were trust and inspire, which like you trust other people and inspire them to follow, as opposed to command them what to do and control their every move. Like they're not going to want to follow you. So you want to build trust with the people you're working with and inspire them to join you on this journey. And that is the kind of leader people will follow.
I just keep writing down books. Like before we recorded today, we had coffee, and I think I bought 4 books at coffee this morning. Like while we're sitting there,
amazing.
Yeah, I get the whale book. I got the
whale book.
There's some great ones out there.
So I know we want to get into real estate. But no, before we do, because I'm wondering this is a selfish question, completely selfish, and you get asked it all the time. Wildest stunt. I need to know. I need to know just something manly, like.
Yeah. Well, I think it's a great question, and I do get asked it a lot, and I think it's a tough one to answer because I've been really fortunate to do some pretty wild stuff in my career. My usual answer is there was a stunt and there's 2 similar, but I'll go with the more recent one, was in Captain America Civil War, where I was doubling Steve Rogers or Captain America, Chris Evans. He's the talking double. One of the Captain Americas, the action guys. And there was a stunt where there's an explosion and the character is propelled back off of a balcony and clips this thing, and that falls onto a roof, or a balcony, I should say, and then falls down to the top of a truck and then to the ground. And the reason I think this was one of the craziest things I've done, but also the most satisfying, is because I got to design that and then perform it and then win a Taurus World Stunt Award for it. So from kind of inception to completion, I was involved in every step of the way, and to be recognized by your peers for something that they deem as, award worthy is amazing. So the actual doing of it was wild because it was just kind of gravity. The second part, the first part was done by Jackson Spidell, who was also doubling, and he's just more talented on a wire, so he was, there's 2 cables and he's doing all these flips and stuff. And I tried it in a rehearsal, and that's actually a really interesting part of the story. One of my favorite parts is the death of ego in that moment, where selfishly, I wanted the whole stunt to myself. Like I designed it, I want to perform it. Didn't think about the award, but I just wanted the satisfaction of performing this whole thing. And I was doing other stuff because I was coordinating it as well. And he had been rehearsing it for me just so we could know what. And then, I showed up on the day and they put me on the wire, and I tried it a couple times, and it just wasn't going as well as, everyone's trying to help me, and the sun's going down, and we're like, oof. And so which is a very interesting position as the boss, like the stunt coordinator and the performer, have to step outside of my ego in that moment. And what I wanted to do was like, I need more time and I'm going to get it right. What was best for the film was to say, you know what? Put on the suit because you do it better than me.
That's one of the best leadership lessons I've ever heard.
And let him do it. And I think because of that, like we were able to win the award, and we made our day. And now I did the second half, which to me is the part that was not as, there was less talent needed for what I did. It was just gravity. Like I was up on a scissor, like on a Manitou, they call it like lift, and they call action. I just let go and I fall, 10 feet to the rooftop, hit that, fall another 12 feet to the top of the truck, and then fall 8 more feet to the ground. That, skill wise, you need some air awareness, sure, but once you let go, there's no coming back. There's not a lot, as much skill involved, in my opinion.
But how did you avoid getting hurt? How do you avoid getting hurt on a thing like that? We're falling 12 feet and landing on.
It's in the preparation. Part of it is in air awareness. And I've done, I spent a lot of air awareness is like your ability to understand in the air where you are. So if we're, a lot of that comes from practicing in the gym and high falls and trampoline work where, if you're doing a flip, sometimes you can get hurt when you go up in the air and you lose track of where you are. So this sense of space and time is very important. So you knowing that when you fall, you're like, pretty soon I'm going to hit oh, there it is. And then now I'm turning and I'm spotting my next landing. And so air awareness is very important. And self-confidence, because there's no going back. Once you let go, you're like, and I've gotten hurt more by half-heartedly committing to something. I've never been hurt when I fully commit to a stunt, mentally and physically, which is, knock wood. I mean, that doesn't mean you won't get hurt if you fully commit to something. Like in a relationship or business, you could get hurt. But in stunts, I found that it was more often than not full commitment to whatever it was I was doing, mentally and physically, was the best result. And so in that, you're just like, I'm letting go and I fully commit. And it helps. And I always would tell other performers, attack the ground. It sounds weird, but when you're falling, don't fall and let the ground come to you. Attack the ground. Control the fall. Like attack it. Like, so I'm in here and I'm standing up and I want to make this fall look good. I'm not going to just jump up and let gravity control what I'm doing. Like, I'm going to attack the fall. Like I'll smash the table and attack the ground. I'll control what I can. And so, with that fall, it was attack the awning, attack the truck. And it really, yes, I got a concussion because I attacked it so hard that my head smacked the truck. But it was full commitment. And visualization is another thing. And sorry that these stories get so long and rambling, but visualization for me was a huge part of my success. Like I would always show up early for that gag in particular. And I would just sit at the bottom and I would watch myself project it doing the stunt and landing perfectly. And I'd go just all the different angles I could think of, just watch it happen, just watch it happen, watch it happen, watch over and over. And I would just say, like the voice I would have in my head was like protection and perfection. It's like protection and perfection. Protection from, God, universe, whatever, protect me during the stunt. And then perfection of like, to the best of my ability, perform this stunt. And I would just say protection and perfection. Just every time I do a big gag, that's what I would say to myself. And, again, knocking wood or, thanking God or whatever, they worked out pretty great. And I think a lot of that was because of the visualization and the commitment to just go for it. And I talk about this a lot to other performers of, you have to think about all the things that can go wrong because your life could be at stake. Identify them and then move them all to the side and focus only on what you have to do to make it go right.
Yeah.
And I think that could apply in a lot of different, spaces of life. But for me, for performing, it was, what are all the things that could kill me, literally? And then, all right, I've identified them. I've done everything I could do to protect myself. And in that situation, part of how you don't get hurt is in the prep. And that's why I'm so proud of it. Because from the design, we mathematically, what's the best angle for this roof? Because we built all of it. What's the best angle for the roof? What's the padding that we can put on there that won't be so soft that you can see it on film, but soft enough that it won't knock the breath out of you and distract you from the next piece. So it's all these little elements of preparation that then allow you to say, all right, all of those boxes are ticked. That could go wrong. Now to the side, focus only on performing what needs to be done in the moment to successfully execute the stunt.
All right. I want to move over to get into the real estate side of things.
The whole reason for this podcast.
Yeah,
okay, great.
No, the reason for the podcast is just to get to know you. But before I go there, I do want to say, one thing we do on the show that's different than a lot of shows is we dedicate 100% of the profits towards a charity of the guest choosing. So where are we sending the money from this episode?
I would like to send the money to the Parkinson's Foundation. My dad was diagnosed with Parkinson's in 2001. And just, I think, a testament to his grit and determination. He was given like a diagnosis of like a couple years to live. And they said the quality of life is going to deteriorate. It's going to happen fast. And it was 2001. It's now 2024, and he's still
really,
Yep. And so it's a long time to the projection past what doctors said. It's a long time, and so he's one of the bravest, strongest men I know, and that's I think testament to that is how long he's struggled with these symptoms. But the Parkinson Foundation, that money they go to, it helps people with the the disease. It also goes to research how to try to find a cure. And I think it's just a pretty great foundation, and I would dedicate that to my dad and his good fight.
Will do, man.
How's he doing now?
He's good. He's got good days and bad days, but more good than bad. And now it's been a really great thing to watch his kind of mindset evolution of just enjoying the moment. And because there's times when he's completely locked up and is just kind of in the throngs of this thing. He's in it. And then it'll unlock. And now he's hopping on the mower and he's doing he squeezes as much life into those moments of movement as possible. And he just, he's living every moment that he's got to the fullest. And it's really impressive to watch.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
All right. Well, this week's episode is brought to you by...
All right, so I look down at my phone and I see this text. You need to call me. Your house is on fire. And I sat there and I'm looking at the screen and I'm wondering, is this some kind of a joke? The guy who sent it was a tenant I had been trying to evict for months and he hadn't paid him forever. He had trashed the house. I mean, it was disgusting. And the guy himself was, pretty darn unstable. Now, of course, I call him after that text and it goes to voicemail. Great. Now, a few minutes later, I get a call from the fire department. Yep, my first ever rental house was burning down. So how did I get myself in that situation? Well, I didn't screen that tenant. I put in someone I thought would be good, and he was until he wasn't. Now, this was over a decade ago, and since then, I've learned how to properly vet a tenant. And that's through Turbo Tenant, which makes screening for both background and credit really, really easy. But it gets even better. Turbo Tenant also helps you market your rentals to dozens of the largest sites, including apartments.com and Redfin. You can create custom leases that cover all your rental laws. And you can even use Turbo Tenant for your automatic rent payments. All of this for less than the cost of your Netflix subscription. Yeah, I know, crazy. Save time, save money, and save your sanity by using Turbo Tenant. And because you're so darn cute, you can use the code Brandon10 to save 10%. So check it out at turbotenant.com/betterlife. Hey, so many of you have heard me tell that story about how I bought my daughter Rosie a fourplex, like a rental property, the week she was born, and how we put it on an 18-year, mortgage payoff plan so it'll be paid off when she graduates from high school. So essentially, my tenants are paying for Rosie's entire college. Now that's pretty awesome, right? Not to mention, it's also making almost like $1,000 a month in cash flow. That's double awesome. But I don't think I've ever shared really exactly how I found that deal. So here it goes. I found it through direct mail marketing. And here's how. I simply built a high quality lead list of a lot of names and addresses of potential sellers. And I sent out a whole bunch of mail to every person on that list. And then I talked on the phone to a ton of people. And then I finally got one person that was interested enough to sell me the property. And I got a deal at a great price. So building that giant lead engine like that, it works, but it takes a ton of time, knowledge, and effort, which can really slow down an investor's growth. Which is why I reached out to my friend Ryan with Ballpoint Marketing. I asked him to sponsor this show because they're the best at doing everything that I just talked about. They're literally going to help you build your entire lead engine. You're going to get a one-on-one call where they're going to help you figure out what you want and then build your lead list for you. Their robots are going to handwrite the postcards with a real pen, which is super cool. They're going to send them out and they'll even answer the phone calls for you. Plus, they'll help you track it all inside of a CRM that they create for you. I know, it's crazy awesome. And it's going to help you land way more deals consistently. And because you're awesome and because you listen to this show, you're going to get a discount when you tell them that I sent you, or just use code Brandon when checking out with them. I love Ballpoint Marketing and officially recommend them to all my friends and masterminds. So if you're ready to kick your deal flow up a notch, getting more quality leads without pulling your hair out, just go to ballpointmarketing.com/betterlife, or just shoot me a DM on Instagram with the word ballpoint, like one word, ballpoint, and I'll hook you up with them directly.
All right. Let's get into the next kind of phase of your life. And that is the real estate side or the business side. So where did that even come from? Where did the idea of I'm going to buy real estate?
Well, real estate started back in, because the money mindset, T. Harv Ecker's, millionaire mindset stuff.
Yeah.
My money mindset was always save, save, save. And so I, as a stunt performer, made pretty good money, but I just kind of squirrel it away. And then I was dating a woman at the time who was like, a bunch of money in the bank, it's just sitting there. You could put it in real estate and your money will grow. I had no idea what that meant. So I was just like, okay, great, let's buy some place. So we bought a condo in Marina Del Rey, or I did. And it turns out to be one of the best investments I've made just over time, just the appreciation and now the cash flow. It's an amazing spot. So in Marina Del Rey, California, that was the first one. And then a great opportunity was, and it's interesting how life flows, but someone else's downtime was a good time for me. It was 2012, and there was a property in Malibu that came up for sale. We were looking for a place to have more space with animals, and we found this property that had been a burnout. So the fire that came through in, I think it was 2007, just wiped the place out, took the house down to the foundation. there was a guest house that had survived. And so it was like 900 square foot guest house, but the property was incredible. It was 3 acres with a creek running through it, but then 5 acres up the hill. All told now it's 11 acres in Malibu, California. So at the time we got it for like 1.2, which is pretty crazy. It worked out. And we wrote a letter, like kind of saying what we're going to use it for. A bunch of people were in first position or buying the property. We were way back like 8th, but just the letter, the heart spoke to the lady. And so we got the property. And that again, to have property in Malibu from 2012 to now, it has, oh my gosh, it's crazy what it has done. Now, the challenge is you can't build on it anymore. They have all kinds of new zoning laws and blue waterways, and it's all a mess kind of bureaucratically, but just pure land and a value, it's fantastic. So I was getting these properties with, again, no idea. I was just doing my thing. I was so focused. Again, my narrow focus on things was all about movies, all about being the best stuntman I could be, and then best director, not even thinking outside of that. And then we moved to a lot of stuff, started shooting in Georgia. So around the Peachtree City area in Fayetteville, I started buying some houses there. Again, just buying them because they were inexpensive and people go, buy real estate. And again, if I had been paying, more attention to the things going on the sides, I would have, it's hard to imagine how much more successful I would be in real estate. Now, my wife makes a great point of like, well, the reason you are where you are with movies is because of that single-minded focus. Yeah. And I don't disagree. And looking back, you'd be like, oh, if you had this epiphany earlier,
But I'm constantly talking out, I've said this on the show before, but I'm constantly talking entrepreneurs out of real estate. Not entirely, but like, I'm always talking with entrepreneurs or people who run their own business, which I would put you in that if you're a director, like, you're making these things working, right? Like, you control your income. And if you try to chase 2 rabbits, as I say in the one thing, you'll catch neither.
Yep.
And so entrepreneurs like, hey, I'm making $1 million a year at my business right now. I'm a little bored. I want to go flip houses. And I'm like, don't do that. Terrible idea. Because now you'd be bad at 2 things.
Yep.
So like, I actually love the fact that you're like, I'm going to go all in on this one. And I'm not going to be as good maybe at real estate right now.
Yeah.
That's okay. Real estate's very forgiving.
Yeah, it can. And it has been, because all of those properties that I bought, again, not as a business, basically as a collector. I buy them and just park it there, have all doubled in value.
Were you buying cash or were you buying?
It would depend. It would depend. I did on the bigger properties, like the ones in California where there were loans. But then I started, because I was pretty cash flush with the movies, I started buying because it was kind of a feeding frenzy in real estate at that time, because it was, interest rates were like 2%. It was very low. People were buying stuff up. And I know the guy in the business who, and I didn't pay attention, but he had like 30 rental properties around there. So then all the people from movies would come into the studio and he would rent the houses out to all the movie people and because he charged California prices and they're totally used to it. And his mortgage is $500 a month. He's charging $5,000 for this rental, and it's just
Matt Buck, who's the COO of the Better Life Tribe. His parents, let's see if I can get this right. His parents own the house from The Walking Dead that they lived in that one town. I remember it's like multiple seasons, and they live in this house and like they were trapped in the basement. That's like Matt Buck's basement.
That's amazing.
It's like this whole story. Yeah. And they're making just tons of money renting this house out.
It's a big thing.
Yeah. And to both the actors while they're living there, but also they use it in the show. And so they get paid from multiple ways. It's
So I would buy cash to get in front of all the people who did the loans, and I'd refi. Well, I met this guy, Brett Vincent, who's a big time real estate investor in that area. And I was trying to find people to manage the properties, because at first didn't have managers. I was like, I can do this. Like, we Airbnb the place in Malibu, and I would do it myself. And it became like a bit of a headache. So then it was finding managers. And so when and they're hard to find. Good property managers are not easy to find. And so in Georgia, I met this guy, Brett Vincent. So I used his company, and he was the one who was, because I'd buy him in cash and just be like, yeah, cash, and then I'll just take the rental. He's like, you could leverage your money a lot better if you refinance and take that money and buy other things. And I was like, you don't say.
Do it.
And he is speaking from, he's got, I think, hundreds of single family homes. He just expanded into storage units. And he's like, well, I spend most of my time flying my plane. And I was like, that sounds pretty cool. So I started to build a seed of the real estate thing. Still didn't take it seriously. It wasn't until 2020 when the pandemic hit, which is very interesting. Sitting at home in Malibu, and you've got a movie coming out, because it was actually one of the perfect storm for Extraction, because it's I would never say it's a great movie, just because this is me objectively looking at it from an artist's perspective. There's great things about it, but I've learned a lot, and things I would do differently. But it came out at a time when people were literally a captive audience at home with not a lot of new stuff, because COVID had just hit. So April 2020, the movie releases and does great. But I'm sitting there, and that's great. It's a high. You're riding that high. But there's no work on the horizon. And so I read Rich Dad, Poor Dad. And it hits me like a ton of bricks, like the line of, if you work for your money, like you are one step away from being poor. And I was like, I am mid-stride right now of that step. Like I'm not working. What am I going to do? And then I started then go, I bought these I had like, I think 4 houses in Georgia and those 2 houses in California. And I was like, I have real estate. I just have to consider it a business and just get much more focused on that. And that could be, we could have some income there. So I did. I started, how could I refi? How could I move things around, with the managers and trying to just pull back on some of the expenses and maybe up the rents? What are some things we could value add to so you could charge more? Started to think about it like a business. And then it became when I would, money would come in from the extraction stuff, I would say, all right, let's take that money and put my money to work in real estate. Mm-hmm. So I think it was reading Rich Dad, Poor Dad that really turned it around. And so then got a few more doors in Georgia. Then my wife had a great idea, which is still it's an amazing idea, to move to Nevada because of the 0 state income tax and move the company out of California because all the stuff going on in California is pretty wild at the time. And so we did. And it's I think it's in T. Harv Ekker's book of Ready, Fire, Aim. Mm-hmm. That's me. Like I just like ready, fire. Let's go. We're going to Reno. Hindsight, Reno's great and I love it. Hindsight, it might have been just easier to do like closer to Vegas because then you could just drive up from when you have to get your car registered and you could just drive up from California. You got to fly to, anyway, Reno's harder to get to. Love the town. So we did. We moved to Reno, moved all our stuff, bought a house that already has appreciated by like, it's doubled in value because everyone was leaving during the pandemic. Everyone was leaving California and moving to that area, like the like Reno, Vegas, what's the Lake Tahoe? Yeah. Like just crazy the real estate value up there just skyrocketed.
Yeah, Idaho too. It was like Boise and Coeur d'Alene. I bought in Coeur d'Alene early. Yeah,
before that. Yes.
Yeah, right on the run up. I bought. So
we were on the run. It would get to place. It was 2000 and it was 2021 that we bought in. So it was right after, but still
that's way about too.
Yeah, before the peak. And so we now moved to the base, like our residency to Nevada. And so we're basing there, living all over because we travel for work, but then starting to start to invest in real estate. And I found, and this is towards the who, not how, another great book, finding people like a great property manager. And randomly, I think it was either a Bigger Pockets forum or I just found something on, it was either Crexy or LoopNet. Like it was a property for sale and there was a number and this guy's name, and I called it because the deal seemed really nice. Or nice, the deal's nice. It seemed like a good deal for the numbers. And so I called the guy and he just seemed really cool. And I flew to Memphis, Tennessee, and it was a portfolio deal. I think it was 8 units or something, like duplexes, single families, and met the guy and just really liked him. Super cool guy. He and his brother were just good Christian fellas, former military, and they were doing something really nice for the community. It was a lot of Section 8 housing, but they were really trying to help people through real estate. And I was like, yeah, it's great. I love what you're doing. And they are, they're the property managers and they just run a really tight ship. I looked through all their books and I was like, seems good. So I was more investing with them than I was in real estate. So I bought that 8-unit mixed unit portfolio, and then I did another 10-door portfolio with them. So then within a space of a year, now it's 18 doors in Tennessee. And I'm currently working on like a 29-unit mixed portfolio, like a 22-unit apartment complex with some duplexes and single families with them now. But because of who they are, not what it is necessarily although if Tesla moves into Memphis, like Elon's talking about putting like an AI thing there, it could just be the luck, right? Being like in the right place at the right time. But I think what they're doing with the community is the most kind of impressive thing. And it's grind city management. And they, for example, on holidays like Thanksgiving, they make homemade pies and take them to all of their tenants. Cool. And they say, hey, if you want to, we're doing this regardless, but if you want to pitch in, it's whatever for a pie. And so you pay for and you just make the people happy. And they've got a great system. This 22-unit building it's with a company or a nonprofit called Pearl, where it's a new nonprofit that is housing veterans in kind of the transitioning out of the military and then into like the real world. And it's a complete government grant. The government's paying the rent. They're paying everything. Yeah. And like it's a really cool deal. But again, mostly what they're doing for the community. and who they are in their community, this family, it's just really cool to support that. And so getting it, that's the most recent venture is into Memphis, Tennessee with larger, multifamily units.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
I love that.
Where do you want to head with that? Like, what's your long-term vision look like for real estate / do you want to get out of your business of directing and all that?
Well, here's what's very interesting. Having a child has changed my perspective on everything.
No, it doesn't change anything. Like, life's exactly the same.
I was that until, it's so funny. My brother said that because he has 2 kids, 2 boys, and beforehand, and I was always supportive of it, having kids, and I'd be like, I'm supportive of it. Children, having families, and I'd be like, family first, and that's how I would say. But the feeling was like, dude, like, we can go make this movie. Like, you're screwing me, man. Like, you're staying home to be with your family. Like, let's go make some, make some movies.
Yeah.
And now having had a kid, I was like 1000% do whatever's best for your family. Stay with, don't go here and be gone with them for 6 months. Like, no, stay with your family. So that has shifted my perspective on everything. So I am now, I'm not saying I'm trying to transition out of movies, but what I want to focus on is taking the money, very targeted income from the film business, and build the real estate portfolio so that I don't have to take movies to pay for the lifestyle that my wife and I and kids enjoy. I can choose to take movies based on the content, based on, the legacy that it'll leave. Like a great movie, a great story, I can say, yes, I want to go do that. And do a movie one every couple of years and not feel the pressure of being like, oh man, like I got to go do this movie because I want to do this or I need to pay this. Just take the pressure off. Like, so then it becomes a much more, I think the plan would be a much more laid back version of the life I have now. Because when you get into movies, it is very time consuming. Which my friend said you could leave movies and you would find something else to consume your time to the same level that movies do. He's like, that's just who you are. Which I think as an entrepreneur, like you find that thing and it's just like, it's you're all in.
Yep.
For me, that's movies. And the challenge with having a kid is I see those that have gone before. I see these families that sometimes in the movie business get torn apart. Sometimes you're just, there was a friend, I went to his inauguration of, he became a judge in Rhode Island, city of Rhode Island, or city of Providence in Rhode Island. And there was his son spoke, and it was a moving speech, moving to tears, because he was a lawyer, this fella, a good friend of mine, Cathcart, and he was very involved in his community, very involved in the law, and now he's becoming a judge. And his son, the thing that his son, probably he's in his teens, and he said, I'm selfishly very excited for my dad to get this job so he'll be home more. Teenager. Like, it's not like, so the kind of all these things that he had done in his life, which are amazing. And I still think he's a great dad. And having, your kids say, I want you to do this different job so you're home more. So you've said on your, social media that no one's going to remember the months you spent, the 27 hours a day on this project, except your kids.
Yep.
Yeah.
And that is like, oh.
Yeah.
So anyway, that's really shifted my perspective of let's invest more in real estate. Let's try to grow that portfolio as quickly and sort of scale as quickly as possible so that you don't have to take all these movies as a way to make income. You can take it as a way to give back, to leave a legacy of great stories and great entertainment.
And then you have the money and the freedom to be able to, because like, I'll say this, there's the idea of like, I don't want to work all the time and be away from my kids. But I also, I love work. You love work. We love, like, you can't take us out of that, right?
Yep.
So you can either leave your family for 6 months because your kid has to do this certain thing in this certain school, or you can do them together. Right. So you can be like, I'm still going to travel. I'm still going to go speak. I'm still going to go to conferences. I love it. So I just bring my family with.
Right.
Because now we have the means to do that. And so by building wealth through real estate, you have those options, and the options give you the ability to work 20 hours a week if you want to, or 20 hours a day if you want to. You can work with your kids. Like that's fun. And then it's kind of the best of both worlds.
Yeah, that's the ultimate goal. Because I do think it's, because you don't want to, I mean, you've said before too, it's not like the goal, financial freedom is not the ability to do nothing. Because then what example are you setting for your kids? So money allows you to be lazy. Like that's not the goal. That's not the lesson we're trying to learn here. It's like work hard, but then work smart, which is let your money work for you as well, so that you have the ability to take the time to go do a 30-day road trip across the country in your Airstream, because you don't have to work. You're choosing to work because it's fulfilling, it's purpose. Like I think humans need struggle. We need a purpose. Like if you didn't have anything to do, I know the three of us go insane. Like you're just like chomping at the bit saying, I need a purpose. I need to do something.
And then you just start an HOA and you become the president of the HOA. and then you have a purpose.
Then you got a lot to do.
Yeah.
Oh boy.
Yelling at me. Your grass looks a little long over there.
Yeah, you got some weeds over there.
Yeah.
The mailbox is too tall. Yeah.
All right, man. So we'll start moving toward, I guess we got all these segments coming up here.
Yep.
I have a couple of specific questions though, to go back to the directing world, the Hollywood world for me. Just stuff I'm curious about.
Yeah.
Chris Hemsworth.
Yes.
What's he like?
Chris Hemsworth is an amazing human being. He's one of, and I say this in every interview, I would work with him every day of the week and twice on Sunday. He somehow finds the way to balance the balancing act of family man with celebrity. And I think that whole idea of celebrity is just like, I don't know, it's a weird thing. He's in the public eye a lot, and yet he still makes the time to give back. Like he's highly, very involved with charities. He's like, and this thing he's doing with Centerfit, like his company, he's trying to help people get fit. And he's just he's a good person. And he's also the most grounded person. And I believe that's because of his family. He takes them with, and he says like, I'm not going to be gone for longer than the next number of days without them. And he has like, his brothers as well, and his mom and his dad. They're just a very tight knit unit. And I think that's important. Having your tribe is very important.
Love it. Love it, man. What about, what's the relationship like as a director / stunt coordinator, like being on the backside with the actors? Like, what's your relationship? Like, are you friends in that? Or is it more like, hey, you're an employee, you're working for me, or I'm working for you? Like, how's that vibe?
That's a great question. It depends on who you are. I was always friendly with, rarely close friends with, because there was and this was just my style. I knew that I had my own thing I wanted to do. I didn't want to encroach on their lifestyle or kind of force myself on them. And different people do it different ways. Like there's, for example, like Hemsworth's double, Bobby Holland Hanton, they're great pals. Like he's in his contract, he takes him everywhere. I never, with the people I doubled, I was friendly with, but at the end of the day, I wanted to go chart my own course. I didn't want to, I say have to, but I didn't want to go on this movie because he made the choice and now I go do it. Like, do I want to do that movie? I don't know. I wanted to be an independent chooser of my destiny. So I was like, I'll be friends with you. And if you need me, call me. But then like it happened on one of the Avengers movies, they're like, hey, come double me for this. And I'm like, I got an opportunity to be a stunt coordinator on this show. So I'm going to go that way. Because where I want to go, which is directing movies, this is a faster way to get there. And these are skills that I need to learn and improve on. I've done the doubling thing and I appreciate it and I love it. Thanks for wanting me. And I'm going to go in this direction.
So in the stunt world, you don't have a guy that you're following around everywhere. I thought that was how it worked, where it's like, hey, I look and I'm the same size as this person.
It can.
So every movie he's on, I'm on.
It can and it does. For a lot of people, I just chose differently. But I think the reason was I knew where I wanted to go. Like I knew that and some people, and very smartly, that's their, I don't want to say their gravy train, but they know where their bread's buttered. It's like, I look like this dude, I'm going to be the best stunt double I can be. And I was when that was what I was doing, but that wasn't what I wanted. That was not my ultimate goal. And I knew kind of, I guess, intuitively that by doing that, it would just take me a little bit far afield of my path, which was to direct. And so, I wanted to be able to choose where I went. So rather than being in someone else's contract and needing to follow them around from movie to movie, I wanted the freedom to choose. And so it's kind of, I guess, entrepreneurial mindset. It's like, I want to be able to choose what projects I go do.
Did you know from day one that you always wanted to direct?
Well, day one, when I was 10 years old, and there's videos of things that I directed. It's very interesting because I guess it was intuitively, or just when you find, later you look at it and go, oh, it all makes sense. At the time, you have no idea. I was just being a kid. But I was reading Louis L'Amour books that if you haven't, I've read all of them at least twice.
Aren't there like 12,000 of them?
I don't know. It's a high number. I think there's a lot. And he's a great author. But those iconic Americana heroes, those Western heroes, really struck a chord with me. And so I would take those stories and I would use them almost like a script. And so then we had this video camcorder, this VHS camcorder, and I would then get my sister to shoot it. My brother would design these fights, and my brother and I would do it. I'm 10 years old, he's 7. I'm beating him up and throwing him around. He throws me over stuff, and we'd riding horses and falling off of horses, trying to recreate these things. So I'm directing movies at 10 years old. No idea not what I'm doing, or that is what I'm doing. And then when Jackass comes around and those guys inspire me and my friend Thayer to do stuff, we're setting up these shots, we're designing these hidden cameras. And so we're directing, we're doing this stuff. So all throughout, I'm on this path, but no idea of where it's going to lead. Now, from this point where I am now, looking back, you go, oh, well, that makes sense.
Yeah.
But at the time, no clue. I did know though, once I walked onto that film set when I was, interning, I did know that I wanted to be involved in the making of movies in some capacity. And then it very much became apparent that I didn't want to, because I did all the jobs there. I was like, boom pole, did it. I was like, that's boring. Not boring. It's very important. It's one of those things where sound is like, you don't appreciate it until it's not working. Or it's not good.
I would teach that when I'm teaching social media is like, your video can suck, but if your audio sucks, nobody's going to watch it.
100%. And that for filmmakers, I say the same thing for filmmakers. That is the number one giveaway of an amateur film is poor sound quality. Because everyone focuses on the visual. They go, oh, it's the visual medium. I got to look the look. And if it doesn't sound good, it's not, high quality. So I'm not downing the boom operators. It's very important. It just wasn't for me. And I did like lighting stuff. Quick funny story. I blacked out a city block one time. I'm red green colorblind, and it just so happens that positive and negative is like red green. And I was tasked to do a tie-in, they call it, where you tie into the city's electricity. When you can't afford to bring your own generator on these small budget movies, you tie in. So you find their electrical box, you pop it open and you take your cables and you clamp into their existing power source.
And they're okay with that.
Yeah. You sign your waiver and so my job, I'm 17 years old and I'm colorblind. I don't tell anybody, but I'm not an electrician. And they're like, oh, great, do the tie-in. I'm like, okay. Take these two cables and I'm like, And what I remember, I remember looking at the box and having these cables. And then I remember being on the other side of the room in the dark and some dude, the gaffer holding me and laughing. And I was like, what the just happened? He's like, you just blacked out the city block, bro. So I had, crossed my wires and it just electrical surge, blacked out the entire block. Someone had to pay for it. It wasn't me. But anyway, so that wasn't for me. So then the storytelling and the action, it was very kind of apparent through that with the martial arts background and the Jackie Chan inspiration, that it was going to be telling stories through physical action.
Yeah. Very cool. Awesome. Are movies a good investment?
No. No, I've actually had that conversation with, here's the challenge with movies. You can't, with real estate, people will always need a place to live. The challenge now with movies, there's so many different forms of entertainment available that movies are very quickly becoming less and less kind of a staple. And people swipe on Instagram, YouTube. Currently it's a tough investment. It's really tough. Now, back in the day when there was a great model of the straight to video action movies. That was a cash cow because you knew foreign markets were going to pay X number of dollars. You put this actor in it, you can make it for this much money. It was a formula. But now with streaming, it just changed the entire game. And so now and now with the cost of making movies and the cost of distribution, and then trying to get people to leave their home and their big screen TVs and their social media to go to a cinema and watch your story, it's challenging. Because
I rarely go to movies in the theater. I was like, I'll just wait for it to come out. Because I had a big screen TV at my house. Yeah. Just watch it there.
And it has to be something special. Yeah. And in order to get that, the time of the story being the thing that takes you there, Fight Club in theaters or something, you're not going to watch that in theaters. It has to be, because superhero movies have also changed the game, and not necessarily in a great way. It's awesome for the storytelling and for the spectacle and visual effects. But now, because what we expect from a theatrical movie is big, bold, crazy visual effects, that costs a lot of money. Yeah. So now the players who can afford to put their stories on the big screen is just such a narrow, group. Yeah. It's really hard to. So I would say put your money in real estate. Do not invest in movies unless it's my movie. And then
Matt Damon was on what's the show where you eat the chicken wings and they get hotter
Hot Ones.
Yeah, and he was talking about how there's no more good stories in film anymore, because the only way movies, at least from what he was talking about, makes money is from the movie theater, correct? And nobody's going to go see that anymore because of streaming services, or we can watch it on a streaming service. And so it's that good storytelling within a film is fading away.
I was just watching clips from Good Will Hunting the other day, and I'm like,
oh my God.
so
Well, he used that. He's like, that'll never
good.
get made again
Yeah.
because it's going to cost hundreds of millions of dollars to make, depending on who
And no
you
one's
get
gonna
in
go to
it,
the theater to see
and you
Yep.
can't make that back up.
Yeah, and the business is changing so rapidly because then a similar thing like the open AI, like open source AI,
Mhm.
and like Sora.
Yeah,
Like-
Sora. Yeah,
like
that's my next question. I was going to say, what is the industry? Because you're in the industry. Are they
Oh my
freaking
God,
out?
sweating bullets.
Yeah, I was going to say, like it changes
Ashton
everything.
Kutcher just put a video
I
up
saw
on like,
that.
oh my God. I think I've told people it was like last year, so now it's 4 years. Like within 5 years,
Yeah.
I don't know if my job will exist.
Yeah.
Now
when,
I think
when a kid overseas for $12
Yeah.
can make an entire
or,
Hollywood
or
movie.
nothing. Like,
Yeah.
it's just like it's
Yep.
just whatever. Because now technology becomes it's progressing at such a rapid rate. Now the cost of it, like
Yeah.
you're not going to have to pay an X number of dollars. It's going to be included in some subscription.
Yep.
Like now your AI with Google, like you've got the power to say, make the here's my story, do this story. Chunk. I not just here's what's so crazy and the I think the narcissism, and not a bad way, but just of human beings who doesn't want to see a movie starring them. And the ability to like with
That's
the
going to be there.
facial, it is, and you're gonna be able to go, hey, here's my story. Do a story about 3 guys sitting around a table talking about real estate.
Yep.
I don't know who watched that movie, but let's
It'd be
say
a great one.
for our example, and then great, and within 3 seconds, your script's written,
Yeah.
and then you go starring Sam Hargrave, Brandon Turner, and Cam Cathcart. Bam! Our faces, because our phones, like facial recognition, are now on those characters, and it's generated in like 10 minutes, and now you have a movie starring us, written by you. But then how do you like make money off of that? Because it's going to be everyone, and there's 8 billion people on this planet can do it.
Yep.
What makes it special? How do you? It seems like it's going to be kind of how film now is like this kind of archaic but romantic thing where people Nolan does it, and like very few people shoot on actual film, but some people do, and it's great. I think movies will become like you'll need this blue check mark to say this movie was created by humans.
Yeah.
As opposed to AI.
And we will watch those in this. And I think we will in the same way that I don't go buy art from Ross. Like
Exactly.
I could buy art from Ross, and maybe I will to stage a rental. But for my own house, I'm not going to buy hotel art.
Right.
I'm going to buy real art.
Yep.
And I'm going to spend a lot of money on a cool piece of art.
Yeah. So then you just have to be Picasso.
Yes.
You just have to be the bet. Like you have to be James Cameron or Christopher Nolan and all the people. The sad part is all those who were making a living or struggling their way to get there. Like who knows in 10 years if this young talent could be the next James Cameron, may not have the time to develop those skills.
I think an interesting way to look at this, or not a metaphor, but another example, a type would be podcasting versus radio, right? So radio back in the day was guarded, like you had to have a full studio and it was expensive. And so every city had a few radio stations and talk shows on those stations, and that was it. And then, and so like it is what it is. It was guarded. Podcasting came out. Anybody in the world with a phone can now do a podcast. And so there are millions and millions of podcasting. Now, did that destroy talk radio? No, it made it better. Now we have Joe Rogan and we have Cam Cathcart.
Big deal. Huge deal.
The quality went through the roof because the cream rose to the top.
Right.
And so now are the big radio stations all out of business? Yeah. I mean, most of them are gone. There's still a holdout in radio, but it's gone in the next few years.
Yeah.
But that wasn't a bad thing to the consumer. It just destroyed an industry of the elites. And that's what's going to happen to Hollywood.
It's happening.
It's happening.
Yeah, it's not. It's because right now you had all these smaller studios, and now it's like you just have the streamers of the main studios, like, and Skydance just bought Paramount. Like things are happening.
Yeah,
It's a big constriction. Like the big everything's just squeezing tighter, so that the where you get your media is now it's just less and less outlets.
Yeah.
Doesn't mean that the competition isn't good for the consumer.
Yeah.
Because the best, because now you're choosing, rather than choosing from 50 films, and you're choosing from 50,000.
Yep.
And so you're going to get
The cream's going to rise.
You're going to
some
get better
incredible
out of
stuff.
that. It's like we talked about earlier before the show is, rather than the perfect photograph, is you take 10,000 photographs. Out of that, you'll probably get a photograph that's better than this person who took 10.
Yep.
Because you're going to get better art. It's just there's going to be so much of it. How are you going to wade through and find how, as an entrepreneur, as a filmmaker, how do you rise to the top? And you have to find a way.
Yeah, it'll be fascinating. And it's not just Hollywood. That's obviously one of the biggest industries, but just so many industries going to be disrupted. And I think it's almost always a net positive for the consumer.
Yeah.
It's just going to destroy an industry in the process.
Yeah.
So I do wonder, we talked about a little bit earlier about one of our favorite books, the three of us, is Red Rising, right? He makes these little, because the book takes place, hundreds or maybe thousands of years in the future. But he makes these little comments occasionally about a war that was previous against AI. And he put it in there like 3 times throughout the whole series that they shut down AI. And I wonder if we're going to have to get to a point in society where we're just going to collectively just say, we're going to choose not to allow Sora to exist. And that's just a choice. I don't know if we'll get there. I don't know if humans can agree on anything, but I do wonder.
Oh boy. I mean, I think there's been some movies made about this. That's what's crazy is the fact that we know where it can go.
Yeah.
We've all seen the movies.
We've seen the movies.
And yet there's this thing in humanity that's like, they go, anyway. Hey, if I plug it in, we could all die. You're like,
okay,
I have to plug it in.
Yeah.
So I don't. It's not like a pessimistic outlook because I try to be very optimistic, and yet I do believe that humans are going to press the button when it comes. I don't know how you. Because of it gives you this God complex, really, because you're creating something from nothing, which creation is, bringing into existence that which never before existed. So with AI, you have the ability to do that, and that temptation, I think, for most people is just too great. You can't not plug it in because you're like, what's going to happen? I don't know, but I want to see.
Yeah,
it's like I can control it. It's that ego of I can control it.
I can control it. Yeah.
Oof, I don't know if we can.
Scary. The pace of technology. I remember watching iRobot thinking, that's crazy, but that won't happen in my lifetime. And it's here.
It's already here. Pretty soon, you're going to have, you're not going to be doing the podcast. You're going to be it's going to be like...
Already, we wouldn't have to. All technology exists right now for us to upload our voice and ChatGPT to write the script and have a conversation, and nobody would know. In fact, surprise everyone, this whole episode has been filmed. Sam doesn't even exist. He's not a real human.
Nope, not this version.
No, but it exists. But all that said... to go back to how it's beneficial for the consumer, Goodwill Hunting the next Goodwill Hunting will come. And there'll be better and better movies because of it. It's just not going to be Hollywood making those movies. It's going to be a kid in his basement in Ohio that's going to make the next Goodwill Hunting because he can make it. And
which is exciting, really, because it's just a shift of the paradigm. Because I think to your point, it's not that art isn't going away.
Yeah.
Storytelling is so ingrained in the human narrative. I mean, human narrative. That's using the narrative as storytelling. It's not going away. It's just how we do it. And the tools we use to tell those stories are shifting so rapidly. It's spinning your brain.
Are actors freaking out about this at all?
100%.
Are they? Okay,
yeah, because the collection of data has already begun in stunt performers as well. Like a lot of these video games, you'll go and do as motion capture. And so now they have your movements in the computer. They don't need you back for the next job. They just use what they've already got.
Now they're going to have to license their likeness at least.
Yeah, it's going to become a different business model as opposed to showing up and doing all these different shows. You're going to do it once. They'll capture your image. Now, I don't know if there's a lot they're trying. They being like the unions and SAG and the guilds are trying to combat that so that people do have the ability to take these jobs. But it could definitely go in a direction where you do it once. My face is recorded, and then you just collect the checks every time. You say, you want, just sign off. This is the story. We don't put your avatar in it. Yeah, sure. Boom. There's Chris Hemsworth. Not real Chris Hemsworth, but he's over there hanging out with his family. So in a way, there's, to your point, there's positives to this as well. Because you could use all of that leverage that you've built up over the years of reputation and skill, do it once, scale it, and then just, sit back and spend the time on things that really matter, which is, you still have to find a purpose, like that gives you a reason to get up in the morning. But I think to do that for your family or for giving back to the community, it could free up a lot of time to do great things.
Yeah, I wonder if the studios, because right now, let's just say you want to make a movie, you want The Rock and Chris Hemsworth in it, right? You got to pay each of them $100 million or whatever the cost is to come get them to come in your movie. In 5 years from now or 3 years from now, when you can just license them now instead of whatever. I don't know. What do you pay Chris Hemsworth to do a movie? 20 million? 10 million? 50? Yeah, I don't know.
It's between 50 and 20.
Okay. So let's say you pay him $20 million to do a movie, but now instead you're just going to pay him $5 million for his likeness because he doesn't have to do any work. And he's like, great, that's a win-win for everybody. Now that's good for a while. But then the studios are going to go, well, wait, I don't want to pay $5 million. I can create a new person that doesn't exist yet. I'm going to make them the next Chris Hemsworth, and nobody's going to know that they're not real. So I wonder if they're starting already. Like I wondered this, like, I mean, maybe The Rock is a bad example, but think of an actor who's just blown up over the last couple of years. Like, somebody who's
Miles
big.
Teller.
Yeah,
Okay,
great
Miles
example.
Teller. Does he actually exist? Have you met him?
Yes.
Dang.
Okay.
Okay, well, whatever.
Next to Miles Teller. Sorry, yeah.
Well, forget
Yeah,
it.
he's a real dude.
Like, I've not met him.
Okay.
I don't know if he actually exists.
Right.
What if he doesn't actually exist? And they're making actors and actresses. I mean, not to get into the adult film world, but that whole, like, that's even worse. Like, that's going to be completely decimated. And maybe, I actually think that's a really good thing, which is a weird thing to say as a, Christian dad, but I think it's going to help society. It's going to make it way worse for consumers in terms of availability, but there's going to be a lot less people victims of sex crimes and trafficking and all that because you don't need them anymore.
For sure.
Yeah.
That's a whole other podcast. That topic, it's a whole other topic we can go deep in. But I think the idea of actors not existing, and but it is already happening. There's influence, like they've created influencers that don't exist. And I think there's an interesting parallel to another reason for the death of cinema is the disappearance of the movie star. And the reason is they're all accessible all the time because of social media. The thing that made movie star, like going to a Tom Cruise movie or going to a Sean Connery movie, whatever it was, is the only time you got access to those stars was on the big screen. So it made it an event. You had to go see the movie if you wanted to be in the same room in the same vicinity of Tom Cruise. Now you just follow Tom Cruise on Instagram and you see what he's doing every day. And the behind the scenes of what they're doing is as interesting as the movie. So I think that's a crazy shift. And I think just taking that a step further to just create a whole cast of people that don't exist. But you create the quote perfect looking person and they're flawed. All these things that we as humans look up to. It's a crazy reason. Because I think flaws are where the beauty is, right? But you have all these people. I think that's why Chris Hemsworth is so. We made this joke that we tried on Extraction to dirty him up and bloody him up and make him look as unhandsome as possible, and it made him more relatable, more likable. People, like the women, were like, "Oh my God, he's even more handsome." We're like, we tried to we make him look older, scruffier and dirtier and bloodier so he doesn't look so perfect. And people responded in a positive way. So I think what I'm getting at is I think people, humans at least, like the imperfections are where kind of the beauty lies, and that might be kind of the thing that's going to make it look like a human movie is like, you look at that. Wait, they forgot to that was like that camera in the back over there. That wasn't supposed to be there. Like, the stuff that you sometimes will leave in. I've done it where you leave in something just to see if audiences will know it was a mistake. But it's the human element of imperfection that makes it so genuine.
Well, you're even seeing that on social media where like the talking head videos that are lit up really well aren't doing as well as somebody just holding their phone up. And
for sure.
Because there is some imperfection to that where it's like, this is just a guy on his lanai talking to the camera. And people love that.
Yeah, because they want to connect.
Authenticity of that.
That's what you're missing with as soon as you start to go too perfect, too well lit, too produced. Same with the sound with music, right? There's something like Tyler Childers.
Yeah, dude,
like,
I love Tyler Childers. Yeah,
you got to get Tyler on the show.
Dude, I would die to have Tyler Childers on the show. If anybody knows Tyler, please hook me up.
That dude's voice, there's a rawness and emotion, like the studio, the vinyl sessions.
Where it's just so good.
Just him in that church with a guitar.
I will follow you, Virgie. Oh, it's so good.
But why is that? I think it's because there's imperfections and there's rawness. I mean, the opening where he's like, he starts and he goes, he goes, hold on. And he starts again. You're like, oh, I've done that every time I practice. And so you relate to that as opposed to this perfectly auto-tuned voice of like, and again, Josh Groban's great, but like that voice where like, he's so perfect, I can never attain that. You go, wait, that's possible. That I can relate to that.
Who's that guy, Ryan, what's his name? Bingham, is that his name? That was on Yellowstone, the show?
Yeah, Ryan Bingham. He's got a spot.
He's now like, growing pretty big in the music world, kind of that indie kind of folk stuff. And it's because his voice is just not perfect. Like, and it's
not even good, but it's great at the same time.
Actually, maybe that's why emo was so good back in the day. Like when you listen to like just great, I mean, my favorite band of all time is New Found Glory. I talk a lot about. I've seen them in concert a number of times. I absolutely love New Found Glory. Which, by the way, they're real estate investors. Good chunk of that
Get
band.
Them on the show.
Oh, they're coming. We're Instagram buddies now. A few of the band members. Anyway, New Found Glory is the greatest band of all time. but they're not perfect. Like the guy's not a Josh Groban singing.
Yep.
Like they've got just a unique style, but that makes it good. And I think almost all emo music and like back in the day was that. They weren't great singers. Blink-182 is not, like none of them sing well.
Even, I mean,
But we love
think of like, I think the greatest example of all time, Bob Dylan.
Yeah. Oh, it's so good. Yeah.
Like the greatest example of not a traditionally great voice.
Yep.
Why is he so great? Well, one, he's a great storyteller, great songwriter, but he's relatable. People go like, oh, I can sing like that. Like I sing better than that in the shower or whatever you say. He's relatable. So I think that part of the imperfection of humanity is that relatability. And I think that's beautiful in music, in life. I see that with my daughter all the time. Like that's so good.
Uncle Cracker. I used to love him because I felt like I could sing like him. He's terrible. He's absolutely terrible. It's like,
relatability.
Follow me.
Yeah, that's a good song.
It is a great song.
Yeah, that's a great song.
It's a great
the imperfection.
It's a great stage name.
All right, man. Let's move on to the next segment.
Too much fun. Okay.
This next segment of the show is called the 3-2-1 pivot.
Yes.
You know what's coming. You listen to the show. So a pivot meaning your life's going one direction and something stops it and changes the direction a little bit. So let's go into 3 books that change the direction of your life.
You know, this whole section has like kept me up nights because there's so many books that have changed my life.
Yeah, you're a reader.
Oh, I did. It was 182 books last year.
Wow.
That I consumed. I consumed, meaning audiobook or like physical book. And I'm usually reading a couple at the same time. So I tried to really, rather than just go, these are the books that I've been reading recently that I really liked. Like that's not necessarily a pivot book, but books that like really fundamentally executed on the definition of pivot. I think the first one would have been The Tao of Jeet Kune Do by Bruce Lee. Because when I was young, like I was going like martial arts and it was, physical activity, and reading that book, not only saw the training techniques that he would use and I became just heavily into physical fitness. Well, that and Rambo First Blood Part 2. I wanted to be Rambo,
Have you met Stallone yet?
I have. I got to sit down in his house and talk about a movie with like a pitching a movie. And here's crazy. Quick aside, I keep doing this. I apologize, but you can cut it out. Editing is for it. Is to be invited into the home of one of your childhood heroes because he called your agents and said, this is one of the most talented new filmmakers out in Hollywood. I want to meet with him to talk about movies. Like I had to pinch myself, and it was just such a strange thing. So that this person that you grew up, and I was like, 14, 15 years old, idolizing this human. For them to recognize all the hard work you've done and admire you for where you have achieved, what you've achieved and where you have arrived in your career is... that feeling is like, it's hard to match. It means more than any kind of award, any kind of accolades, just pure, acceptance or recognition is just so powerful. So yes, I have sat with Sylvester Stallone, and that was incredible. Books. So Tao of Jeet Kune Do by Bruce Lee, because it was not only the physical workouts that he would do, the techniques for kicks and punches, but it was the philosophy of, be like water, the very famous one. But of like the same thing of 10,000 hours he talked about back in the 60s when he's writing this book is like, fear not the man who's done like, 10,000 kicks one time. It's like one kick 10,000 times. You're going to get pretty good at it. If you put that effort into practice, you will become good. And so that really shifted my focus in martial arts and life. So that would be the first book. Second book, since that's the physical kind of side, I think go to a spiritual type book was, I think, The Power of Now by Eckhart Tolle. Because it just really, especially with it, interestingly, at least in my kind of growing up with it, like grew up Christian, and a lot of that, in a way, there was a lot of focus on past and future of like looking towards this beautiful new heaven, new earth kind of thing, and then looking back to like these are all the ways of the past, and which I understand now of like it helps you live more present in the moment. But there was a time in my life when I was missing the middle.
Yeah.
And so for this idea of all we have is the present moment. And through that present moment, you can either think about the past, you can think about the future, but without the present moment, none of it exists. And so focusing on that and being present for each encounter, like, and you see the opposite example of like, say, being on your phone. I mean, you're present, but you're somewhere else. Like rather than being here at this podcast and being completely present with like looking in your eyes and him, here I am. And it's this moment of 3 humans interacting. we kind of are thinking like, oof, I'm hungry. What am I going to eat for lunch? Or like trying to think, remember, like I was supposed to talk about this. And so now you're pulled in two different directions. Like if you can just be present, that's where the magic happens. So that book was just a huge pivot for me of focusing on the present moment. And it affects the way I parent, affects the way I'm trying to be like a husband, is like, just be present. Don't look forward and try to solve your wife's problems when she wants to talk. Don't like look back and say, well, you said that. Doesn't matter. Doesn't exist. Like that was like in the past and it's gone. This future doesn't exist. Right now, she needs someone to listen to her and just listen, just be present. And that is the greatest gift you can give anybody, is your presence. So that book, huge influence on me. And then the third one would be Healing Back Pain.
Oh, John Storno. Dude,
yeah.
That book totally changed my life.
Guys, I still don't buy any of it.
Yeah, it's completely ridiculous. But tell us about this.
Well, and
it isn't.
Yeah.
because the power, like this is what now it's becoming proven. Like, here's why it isn't, Cam, being a Christian person yourself. There's nothing, you can't prove anything about like, say, prayer and you can't prove it.
Mm-hmm.
You believe it.
Yeah.
And why does it work? Why does why does believing and manifestation, visuals, all this stuff, why does it work? Because it does. It's like one of the things of the universe of like, it's positive or negative. It works. So with your back, with your body, the mind-body connection is undeniable.
Yeah.
So like happened to me this morning. The reason that book is so pivotal was this morning I was running on the beach and I had a bout with back pain, recently, revisited the book, went away. Happened. On the beach, hadn't had pain, like on a plane for 12 hours getting here. Fine. I start running on the beach. Oh, my back. Why? You could say, I didn't stretch. It has nothing to do with it. What was I thinking? Because then you start, what it does is you start to think, what's going on up here?
Mm-hmm.
I'm anxious about the podcast because I love this podcast. I don't want to stumble on my words, which if I'll listen to it again and be like, oh God, you screwed up. And then I'll think of the power of now and be present in the moment. But what it does, I was thinking like, okay, yeah, all these things are happening in my mind. And that's leading to, and the past of running has been like, you have this, or I do, this preconceived notion that running is like hard on your back because it's like it's pounding your back. Humans have been running for fucking millennia.
Yeah.
It's not running that's like bad for your back. A bad technique can be bad. And so I'm running and my back's hurting and I'm just like, oh, it's not real. It's like, it's TMS, attention myositis syndrome. It goes away.
Yep.
Yeah. And like, I come here and like, I'm feeling great. Back's good. Throw a high kick afterwards. I'm ready to go. But the reason I think now, it won't work for you if you don't believe it. Mm-hmm. That's what's crazy.
Yeah.
If you do, it can. And I think then actually the person that turned me on to that, here's some full circle stuff, Chris Hemsworth.
Oh, really?
Yeah, because he was dealing with some back pain. And then when you kind of look at what was going on in his life that equated to the back pain, you're like, that makes sense. And the book makes sense. Because he could go out and like he was doing Thor and there's some stuff going on with family and challenges at work. And, the thought was, oh, it's the heavy costume, it's cape. And so he couldn't do it. He goes off same time. His back's hurting. It's just great pain. Gonna have surgery. And he goes surf for 5-6 hours. No problem. And you're like, that doesn't make sense. Comes over, leaves that show. No different in routine necessarily. Comes over to our show, like Extraction. Back was killing him. He was going to have surgery, planning all these surgeries. Comes to Extraction where we tried to have like a very kind of chill environment. Back pain goes away. He's doing way more physical stuff. He's fighting 18 hours a day, and we didn't shoot that long, but long takes, lots of action. Back feels fine. Why?
Yeah.
Right. It's a mind-body connection that is so powerful. I can't explain it other than it is a real thing. So healing back pain.
Healed you.
Yeah. Well, so what my story with that book, so I interviewed Adam Gilbert, who's founder of My Body Tutor, on this podcast back 7 months ago, something like that, right? And at the end of the interview, I don't think we did it live. I think it was a conversation after we got done recording.
Yeah, because I would have remembered. I've listened to all your podcasts.
Okay, good.
I'm a huge fan.
Thank you, man. So after the episode gets done, I'm talking to him and I'm almost like, yeah, my back's just killing me. Like it's really bad. I had to stop jujitsu. I had to stop all stuff. And like, I can barely walk. I'm falling down stairs because I just be walking and my back just gives out and I just fall down, like tumble downstairs. I've done it like 3 times in the last year. And I'm like, it's just so bad. And he goes, and this is Adam from My Body Tutor, very scientific, focused, the most like well-rounded fitness person I've ever met. Like, and he goes, yeah, you got to read this book from John Storno, Healing Back Pain. And I'm like, he's like, just, it's weird. Just trust me, just read it. And he's like, it changed my life. And I'm like, all right. So I read the book. This is on like a Friday or Saturday. I read the book. I listened to an Audible. I went and walked around, listened to it. The next day I woke up and by the way, I read the book. I'm like, this is just complete garbage. Like the basic gist for those who haven't heard is like, you don't have back pain, you have mental problems.
Yeah.
And
Yeah,
like,
basically.
you have stress in your brain. And
You don't need to read the book now.
Yeah. And the solution is to read the book.
Yeah, there you go.
And I'm like, this is, I was like, this is silly. There's no way that this can be true. And I wake up the next morning and the first time in a year, I had zero back pain. I woke up and I'm like, what a weird coincidence. Just wild, right? I'm like, it'll come back tomorrow. Next day, nothing. I went 2.5 weeks with no back pain. And I wasn't stretching different. In fact, I was doing physical therapy. And in the book, he was kind of controversial. But he's like, stop doing physical therapy, stop stretching, stop doing anything to fix it because it's not your back. It's your brain.
Yep.
So 3 weeks later, it starts coming back, or 2.5 weeks later, it starts coming back. And I'm like, oh man, see, I knew it. So I read the book again and it goes away. Yeah. And the same,
It's true.
All right.
It's absurd, guys. It doesn't make any sense.
Because, and again, just to support what he's saying is I read it probably, I mean, that was extracted almost 6 years ago now. Having like, stuntman, it's back pain's part of it. And I read the book, pain goes away. And then for the longest time, don't have back pain. And then it kind of hit me. I was up on the show in Montreal and I was like, my back has been in pain. I've been hurting since August. This is now, it's March. Like, that's a long time to go with, back pain. And I fell prey to, I was like, oh, it was because I did this workout at home and I didn't warm up and I was doing a lot of kicks and that's what it was. And it lasts for 8 months. Like, that's not science.
Yeah.
And so I go, I reread the book. Goes away. Yeah. and then I'm on set and I go, my back. And then I start talking with a friend of mine, fellow stunt performer who's an awesome dude, Nate Perry. And we're talking about it. And because he talks about, and again, getting a little deeper into the book, now you really don't have to read it. It's about rage. Like, it's kind of the anger and and he's like not trying to be a psychological self-help book of say like, oh, you have to go and talk about it. He's like, just acknowledging it and just realizing that it exists is the first step. And it does. So my back's hurting. I'm on set and I said, I'm struggling with this stuff. And I'm angry that, and this is hard to admit, but it's really interesting to hold these two ideas that both can be true. And it's something I've worked on recently of the and instead of but. It's like, yeah, I'm this, but that negates the first thing you say. Like, to be able to say, yes, I am angry at my child.
Yep.
Because for me, that I don't get to do all the things I used to do whenever I want to. And I love her more than I could love anything on this planet.
Yeah.
Both can be true. Just saying that out loud, that I'm angry at my child. Innocent little, 17-month Ronan. No reason, but I am angry. Back pain goes away. It's the expression of these emotions that we just tamp down and we suppress because we've taught not only as men, especially as men, but as humans in society that anger is like a bad emotion. It's dangerous. You don't want to be angry. And I know like my dad would get angry and throw stuff when we were growing up. So I was like, I don't want to be angry. I don't want to act like that. So anger then it becomes bad. Anger is one of the most profitable emotions you can have as long as you understand it and allow it to be and then, positively channel it. But trying to tamp it down, that is, it was my back pain. It was anger that I wasn't able to express or realize that I had.
Yeah.
And when it comes out, pain goes away.
It's amazing.
At the REI summit that we just did for Better Life a few months ago, there was a gentleman there I met who is a neurosurgeon.
I was going to talk about Seth. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. And he specializes in lower back pain.
Yeah.
And so I asked him about the book and he never read it. He'd heard about it, but so we talked about it for a while. He went and then read the whole book on the flight home and he texted me this like big, long, here's all my thoughts on the book. And his basic gist, if I could sum it up, was, yes, I believe like this book, it's on, like, yes, I see this. Yes, I know a lot of it's fake. And like I have been in people's back and I can see when there's something broken. So there are times, and he thought
100%.
Sarno was too generous with it's always in your brain. He's he's like, there are people, but half, I think he said half, maybe like, I don't see anything wrong when I open up their back. There's nothing there.
Yeah.
So it's.
Well, and he made the comment to me because we were kind of all just sitting around talking about it. And he said that 100% the people that come in and say, I'm going to get better are the ones that get better. He's like, there's a direct correlation with the people that are, hey, I'm going to figure this out. I'm going to get taken care of. I'm going to be pain free versus the people that I'm just going to be in pain for the rest of my life.
Yeah.
Brains are incredible.
Yeah. Well, I would never, I've seen a lot of gnarly injuries in the business I've been in. doesn't mean that back pain is always in your brain.
Yeah.
You could have some serious issues with your back,
Mm-hmm.
like, broken, torn muscles, all kinds of things. And the majority of the time, like for the example you used of, I was just walking down the stairs, like a fit, normal, healthy person, and your back goes out, like that's not a thing physically.
Yep.
But for it to spasm because of tension, that's a thing.
Yep.
And but that's mental, right? So, but the thing that
No, you're
we're
good.
gonna keep
You're
going.
good.
I'm trying to break the record. I
love
remember
it.
the last time was the last podcast you did. You guys were like an hour and a half, and it's like this podcast is going way over. We're gonna try to break the record.
We're gonna break
We already
records
talked
today.
for an hour beforehand.
Oh,
We could do this all day.
Dude,
I know.
that's the problem is I totally could. I know you got other things to do. But the last
we're good.
thing on John Sarno, probably not the last thing. But the reason I'm fascinated by this is because I think most of the time we run to this quick fix, this physical. It's usually physical. Pop a pill, ask someone else to fix our problems. Because I would be like, oh, I have to have Rick, who's this amazing healer, who is like a physical therapist, but he understood the mind-body connection. And he'd be like, oh, my back, I need Rick. Rick can help.
Yeah.
But the beauty of like this book, or the idea that it's in you to fix you.
Yeah.
And healing yourself, like the body. And that's why I've started with, again, another weird non sequitur here, but fasting and the power of the body to heal itself when you give it space and time. Unbelievable. Like the research on fasting of like the power to just stop eating and allow your body to recover, allow those cells that like those, killer cells to go find all the issues. We're killing ourselves by not giving ourselves space and time to heal. And I think similar emotionally, like we suppress so many things as opposed to making time to meditate, making time to just allow yourself to be angry, allow yourself to cry, because your body knows how to heal itself.
Yeah.
We just don't let it.
I just did a 4-day water fast and never felt better.
Really?
Oh, yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
I mean, it was...
Have you done it
3
yet,
weeks ago.
fasting?
I've done 24, 36-hour fasts, but not longer than that.
I don't know if I'll go this far, but I was reading this book, and there's a institution, I think, in Arizona where they say they have, out of 100 people that come there, it's all about fasting. It said 99 out of 100 people are completely healed of all ills, from cancer to diabetes to whatever.
Jeez.
But they do fasting from 24 hours to 40 days.
To 40 days.
Because they're like, Jesus did it.
Yeah.
Like it's not, we were so like precious about, got to eat with this society. It's like, there were like in almost every religious, culture, their fasting is for like celebration, for healing, for spiritual enlightenment. Like it's part of the thing. Like even Native Americans would do their vision quest where they didn't eat. They'd run for, hundreds of miles, not eat. Jesus did 40 days and 40 nights not eating. It wasn't because he was trying to break some record. It was like healing his body and like trying to just have a deeper spiritual connection.
Yeah.
I read recently about that in that story where Jesus goes in the wilderness, or whatever, and he fasts for 40 days and then he meets the devil, right? Like the story. And people are often like, oh yeah, Jesus must have been so weak being out in the wilderness and fasting. And it said, well, what if the reason he fasted and went to the wilderness is to prepare for meeting the devil? Like, so maybe it was not a weakness. Maybe that was the building up strength.
I would totally agree with that. And like a way, the literal version could be, he went there and met the devil, different person. An interesting point of view that just popped out to my head, and I love these philosophical discussions, would be if you want to meet the devil, don't eat for 40 days.
Yeah, exactly.
Meaning like you will start to see things, you will start to feel things that you'll be like, whew, I didn't know that existed in me.
Yeah.
And you'll be talking to the devil. But it's a very but in the version of the negative sides of yourself, like you start to feel things and see things, and your kind of experience is very raw. So you're tapping into things that are already there, but you just because you're eating and you're just living your life, you don't stop to consider all of those negative feelings, the anger, the fear. It's very interesting.
With fasting, that's one of the most beautiful things that's done for me, is it's opened up like a view of to where the parts of my personal life that suck, because when I'm having eaten for 48 hours and I'm getting angry, like I can identify that of like, I probably need to work on my anger. I have a short temper with my kids. And so it allows me to work on myself in these fascinating ways. But I think what I love about this conversation, because we were talking about this in Coeur d'Alene last week, where I was like, the biblical principles, like even take aside Christianity. I obviously am a Christian, believe that Jesus came, died, lived a perfect life. But take that aside, and even like going back to healing back pain, like prayer, the Bible says, believe it to be so. And And that's just one of the, like, anybody can do that. Even if you're not a Christian, like if you have belief that you will be healed.
Mark 11:24. Whosoever stand on that mountain, be there moved to be like cast in the sea and not doubt in your heart. Like it's going to happen. And that you could say it, as a Christian. That's like, I think, a universal law. Take it however you want. For saint and sinner alike, if you believe it, that's the power of the human, like a human mind and the mind-body connection of And that's, if you think about that, that's the next level, like moving a mountain.
Yeah.
Now that could be metaphorical to like whatever it is in your life to move that thing. I believe that's possible. But you don't have to just be Christian. I think that's a universal law, and it works both positive and negative. Like that's the book of Job, right? Like that fear, what I've feared is like come upon me. That's the other side. So I think and I think it's such an interesting journey, like spiritual journey, which again, whole nother podcast, but like being raised Christian and then, you go to Hollywood and like, it's just like a different world. And then kind of returning, I wouldn't say necessarily returning to Christianity, but understanding, having a great appreciation for the principles. And you're like, that makes a whole lot of sense. Or that's what my mom was trying to say all those years. So that's what Dad meant by that.
Yeah.
Or that's what that Bible verse could mean for me now. It's really, in the last 2 years, has been a very significant kind of shift in my perception of what a lot of those principles mean and how to apply them in daily living.
Yeah, it is a whole different podcast. I'd love to somebody do, but because I've noticed this transition from there was religious Christianity, and then it was like, I feel like culturally we're a Christian nation. We went away from that to like agnostic or atheism. And then there's this resurgence of what I would call like intellectual Christianity. Yep. Like Jordan Peterson's leading those charge, right? Yep. Like, but Russell Brand's now, it's like, they don't necessarily believe that Jesus came, died, and rose again,
right?
Literally, but everything about Alex Fleece and I had this conversation on this podcast, but because Alex is now intellectually like, oh, I get it. Like all the stuff I rebelled against actually makes a lot of sense. Now 100%. I don't have to believe it literally, but
100%.
Yeah, and that's an interesting,
super interesting. Because I would say that saying all the stuff I rebelled against, I get it. Yeah, that's happening. Yeah, and then you start, a lot of it's being a dad and seeing like your kid. You're like, I get it. But that movement within myself, it's hard to speak. I think you're totally right. Like seeing the movement on on whatever I see on Instagram and just different people that I know, you can feel it. Yeah, and I think a lot of it has to do in my own life is like the need, like the human need to have a foundation of belief. In something. You gotta, if you, who sings that song? Aaron Tippin. You've got to stand for something or you fall for anything. It's a great song. So having something where you can go like in your times of trouble, like to reach out to and hold on to whatever that is for whoever you are out there, you need something. Yeah. Otherwise you just, and you just start flailing. And I know that was me for a while because you're like, you rebel against that. That doesn't make sense. This person says this and you're being influenced from the outside and you go, But now being like, there's some seriously fundamental principles that are in the Christian faith that are universal. Like it's not like, Christians believe it and you do your thing. It doesn't apply over here. Universally, I think it could apply.
The two most fascinating to me right now are drinking. Because there's so much that's coming out, literature that's coming out that's talking about how drinking is terrible for you. And the other one is sexual immorality. I saw yesterday, I was reading about pornography and what it does to your prefrontal cortex, buddy. And the and
that's
how,
another podcast too.
Yeah, that's a whole nother podcast.
Fascinating.
It's so fascinating. And even like when you're looking at this, like this isn't to keep you away from like something that's fun. It's because there's a biological like thing that happens in your body when you see this or when you drink this that is going to lead to a worse life. Yep. And it's so fascinating to me where like those were the two things when I'm 18 years old. I'm like, this is stupid and this is stupid. I want it to partake in both. And now looking at it now, I'm like,
now it's like, maybe the Bible was.
Well, here's what's so fascinating about that is is there, because except for Jesus, I guess most of the people in the Bible, most of the great examples in the Bible failed.
Yeah. Yeah.
David, before he became a man after God's own heart, like had somebody murdered.
Yep.
Yeah. Not super stoked and not super great.
After watching his wife bathe on a roof.
But still, that's jealousy. That's like all these things. Saul, So part of what's interesting is like, is there like that instinct? Do you have to, not have to, well, unless you're Jesus, do you have to go through all that stuff to kind of understand it experientially, like in a way? It's like a philosophical question.
Yeah.
I don't think you do. However, once you do, I always in my life learned by making mistakes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
In film school, the lessons I learned were not sitting in a classroom being told how it works. It was being out in the field, demonstrating how it doesn't work, and then knowing next time I'm not going to do that.
Yeah.
And that was making these mistakes. And then from that, this is again the power of now, where are you going to go from this moment? You've made the mistake. Now what?
Mm-hmm.
Do you keep making it? Or do you say, I have made the connection from this principle I heard? Because, the film example of like the golden rule of thirds or crossing the line, like, I know, sure.
Mm-hmm.
But then you make the mistake and you go, oh, I see why that is much more pleasing to the eye when you put somebody on like the upper third, put the eyes up there. I get it now because I put them down here and it doesn't make sense. So you go and you drink until you like throwing up in the bushes. You're like, I get it now.
Yes, makes sense.
I get it. Or you do, and then you like make some like, just bad decisions, and you go, I get it. That moment when you get it, that's I think what is the mettle of a man, which is, what are you going to do from this moment forward?
Yeah.
Are you going to change and try to be better and not make the same mistakes again? Or are you going to just go, I need to do it again to learn my lesson? Because that's another one that is kind of in the Hindu religion of the reincarnation. You'll keep coming back until you learn your lesson. Then you can move on. And I think in life, and I know it's for me too, is you keep making these same mistakes until you learn, I got to change and move on to the better version of myself, and you can leave all that stuff behind. So I think it's a very Christian say Christian fundamentalist, but a fundamental Christian belief of the person going through this trial and tribulation to get to a place of knowledge and understanding, and to where you kind of go, oh, I get it. And it's usually, if you think about, all of them, trying to think of other than Jesus, like who was just great the whole time.
Ruth?
Daniel, maybe? Like
Daniel was a stud.
Jacob. But anyway,
Jacob had problems.
Yeah, see, so in general, like the large majority, I think that's why people like those stories so much. Like the Bible speaks to people because they're flawed, just like
they're all just terrible humans.
Yeah. Well, not all, but they do make mistakes.
Ruth did okay,
but they do make mistakes because that's human.
Yeah.
And then we talked about earlier, like the
flaws.
the faults, the flaws, like that the Japanese artwork that's like where you use gold to put this stuff back together, and that's more valuable because it's woven into the fabric of your existence. And
you mentioned David in the Bible, and I remember David Green and I got into a debate one time, or discussion, or argument, you could even call it, because he was talking about, he always loved to bring up David and how he's such a man after God's own heart, and like David's such a hero. And I was like, hey, David, David Green, David in the Bible was a villain. He was not the hero. He was the villain. If you read that story from that lens, and you're like, he almost never did good things. Like very rarely did he. Like majority of the time, he was a terrible father, a terrible husband, a terrible human, a terrible leader. He had these moments, but God still called him a man after my own heart. And so it just shows that all the things that you do not define you, like whether or not you're a man after God's own heart. There's only one thing that does, and that's it. If you're a man after God's heart,
so there was a church drama at one point where a guy got up and he talked about David and talked about how he's the hero and like a man after God's own heart. And the next pastor had a little bit different of a belief and got up on stage and he preached the exact opposite message, where he's like, David is not the hero of the story. God is the hero of the story. David's purpose is to show us that God can still redeem a really terrible, messed up person over who does it over. And because you see so many times in David's story where he fails and is redeemed, and he fails and he's redeemed. I love David's story, just like looking at everybody's lives, but like David goes through such a long period of depression and melancholy, and God still loves him. And at the end of his life says, that's a man after my own heart. And so I think it's a fascinating just how you view that David's not the hero. Like the point of David is to show, at least to what I believe, is that you can still be loved and cherished by God no matter how much you screw up.
Yep.
And that's beautiful in any religion.
It is. And it reminds me of this like the video I saw recently. It's fantastic. The guy takes a $20 bill. You probably saw it online. And he's perfectly crisp, and he looks like, who out here like wants this? And everyone's like, oh, I'll take it. And he's like, crumples it up. Who wants it now? Everyone raises their hand. He puts it on the floor, stomps on it. He's like, who wants it now? Everyone raises their hand. And it's like, you guys just learned a valuable lesson. And it's like, imagine like the reason you wanted this, regardless of what I did to it, is because of the value that it holds. It's like in life, like you might get beaten up and like make mistakes and become like less than your perfect form, but you still have value.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that would be, because there's a lot of ways to look at that, the David story, but I think that one is that, that you make mistakes, but you still have value. You're still worth something to God.
Why has the story of David not been made into a Hollywood movie yet? People must be trying.
I can't speak for that, but I tell you what, maybe it ought to be.
It ought to be. Actually, so funny story. I actually brought that up because I've for years I've had that dream of like I would love to see a great movie about David where David's not the hero.
And you also mentioned wanting to write a script.
I know, right? Well, so this.
Hello,
Bruce,
all of you. Remember when I said
I know we got a director here.
I could play David.
Hey, I like it.
Well, so Bruce, who was on the podcast, we haven't aired the episode yet as we're recording this, but Bruce is a good friend of ours, lives on the Big Island. He was involved in movie making. And randomly I said it to him, like one of the first times I met him, I was like, dude, I would love to see a movie. Like I want to write a script around the story of David. And he goes, dude, we wrote that. He's like, we were making it. And like they were actually like they had like I don't know, Sony or one of them was on board.
Wow.
And they had all this stuff. And it basically came down to the actor. They gave him a list of like 5 actors that they had to pick. And like it was like Shia LaBeouf was one of them and a few others. And they couldn't get one of those actors. So the whole thing, but it was the same thing. It was a perspective of David that wasn't David's a good guy. Like necessarily, like not the bad guy, but like
anti-hero.
It's like he was a crappy human, and it was a very dark, gritty movie. And I was like, that's the movie I want. I want a dark, gritty movie that starts with Goliath. Doesn't like that's not the apex. Like that's not the peak. It's like, oh yeah, that happened. But let's like Sunday school. Let's not talk about the Sunday school story.
Hey, I love that idea. So maybe that's why I came here.
Maybe that's why you came here, dude. Oh,
for you too. Like to write that screenplay. I mean, hey, come on now, save the cat, hit your beat.
Oh yeah. Okay. I need to. Yeah. All right.
Perfect.
That was the longest pivot book answer
of
all time.
I love it. You're welcome for that as well.
It was great.
Right. Wait, did I get all? I did get all 3 of them. Okay, great.
Get all 3.
Yes.
Phew, thank God.
So, 2 pivot people. Who are 2 people that have changed the direction of your life?
2 pivot people. Again, very challenging, but I have to say Donald Whittier, who was so many different things in my life. First, my martial arts instructor, and also introduced me. He was the one who produced that feature film that I then was allowed to intern on, which opened up my whole viewpoint on movies and set me down the path I'm on today. So Donald Whittier for sure. And then my daughter, Ronan, because we've talked about briefly, but the pivot in my life of going one direction, thoughts, dreams, aspirations, when she arrived, completely pivoted in a different direction. Just the focus, the what I'm here to do, completely shifted in a profoundly positive way.
Mm-hmm. That's amazing.
That was a much shorter answer.
Yeah, you got to give you something for Instagram.
Yeah, there we go. Number 3. Is that your question? Did I ask the last one?
You got pivot quote.
All right, fine. Pivot quote. What's a quote that has changed the direction of your life?
One also kept me up nights, and there's so many good quotes. I'm gonna go with since we're on this topic, you can't control what happens to you in life. All you can control is how you react in that situation. So it's attitude and perspective, and I narrowed it down to A and P. Let's just say A and P, which is attitude and perspective. The attitude you bring to the situation, which usually you can choose to be positive or negative. So you choose your attitude, and then the perspective you take. It's not always just like the truth is multifaceted. You just look at it and say, this is how it is. If you just shift your perspective a little bit, you go like, oh, it's very different. Mm-hmm. So I think, and I learned that actually, Donald Whittier, the first, obviously it's not his original quote, but what I learned in my martial arts training, and you can't control necessarily what happens in any given moment. Mm-hmm. You can control your reaction to that moment. And that was used in fighting. Like someone kicks you in the face, you can't control that it happened, but how you react. Do you start, do you break down and say, I'm done, I can't win? Or do you get angry and say, I want to hurt them? Or do you say, oh, like I should put my hands up next time and move and counter that? It was used in that context, but I think for life, it's one of the greatest lessons of you control how you react to the situation, even though life comes at you in a bunch of different ways you can't control.
Yeah, I've heard it said often, like you can't control the waves, but you can learn to surf. I've seen that on like
That's
t-shirts.
probably way more poetic. It fits on a t-shirt better. That's for sure.
It definitely fits on a t-shirt or
Tell
like
you
a
what,
Ross art.
A and P might fit on a t-shirt.
A&P might. Yeah. So speaking of attitude and perspective, last night I put on Dumbo for my kids, the new Disney, like the live action Dumbo. I'd never seen it and they hadn't seen it. So like, let's watch Dumbo. And my son goes, who's 4, he just goes, Dad, I'm not going to like this. I know I'm not going to like this. And I was like, what kind of attitude and perspective is that? Like, I got in this like long, like detail, like discussion with him on like how we need to, what you believe is what comes true. And they're like, I believe I want $1 million. My daughter says, I'm like, no, you don't. Like, it doesn't work that way. But yeah, it was that attitude. Like and then he didn't like it because he said he wasn't going to like it. Yeah. I'm like, how many times in life do we do that as well? We just prejudge something as I'm not going to like that.
That is profound. Yeah. Expectations are
everything.
Everything.
Yeah.
And that's, a movie. Someone talks up this movie and you have these expectations. Ooh, it's like, I'm really going to love this movie. And then you put all of this on it, like what it needs to be good. And then instead of just watching it for what it is, you look at it through the lens of what do you want it to be. And most of the time you're disappointed. So I think that's huge. Just let things be, and people, be who they are. And that was kind of back to like raising kids, as opposed to like, you're going to be this person. I'm going to mold you into this great whatever. You're probably setting yourself up for some serious disappointment.
Yeah.
Beautiful. All right, moving on.
All right, we're moving to past, present, future sections. So, question for you. What advice would you give to 18-year-old Sam?
Ooh, 18-year-old Sam. I think the idea of that, kind of what we talked about, of your choices and your kind of expectations on things will chart your path. Meaning, and I use that to great effect when I was younger. I was like, this is what I wanted, and I put it out there, and I went for it. However, like your habits kind of become who you are. So just watch your habits for good and bad. Just watch out for your habits, because it seems in the moment like a pretty, non-significant act or thing.
Yeah.
But it compounds over time to become something maybe you didn't want it to be. And the inverse is true. Like all those little steps in a positive direction, that compounds to be, become the person you want to be. So just, watch your habits. Be very aware of what you're doing at that age. Because your habits become your actions, which become your character. Like that's who you become.
I love that.
The next question, I call it the Better Life question. I've done two different questions here over the last few years of the podcast. I want to actually ask both of them to you. Ooh. I haven't done that because I would love to hear your answer on both.
Let's do it.
One of them is related to what you just said. And that the question I used to always ask was, what is something in your life right now that you're working toward, like whether it's a habit or action, that's giving you a better life? So that's the first question. And I'll throw a second one after you answer that one.
Well, I'm going to tap old Hal Elrod here and say that the Miracle Morning practice has been, like, I've been doing it. I'm on day 334, I think, of just consistently doing those 6 practices. And it's interesting because I did for many years some of that. Like I was meditating and exercising was just a part of my life since Rambo First Blood Part 2 and Bruce Lee. So that was in there. And then journaling was a big thing. But to add visualization and what are the savers? You got silence, affirmations. That was it. Visualization, exercise. R is what's the R?
Isn't it writing?
No, that's
writing.
Scribing.
Writing.
Scribing. Reading. Because readers are leaders.
RITING.
Nailed it. This is. Let's start that again. So the Miracle Morning has been what I have been implementing in my daily life to make things, make me better. And it's my time for me. Like I try to, do that. I did try to do that before my daughter would wake up. I've done a whole new thing, and this is just throwing that out the window. It's now my day, my miracle day.
Yeah.
Because it's one of the coolest things I've shifted my mindset is I was the 5 a.m. wake upper. I was a cold plunger. I was like, all those things, because I believe we should become comfortable with being uncomfortable. Yep. Push yourself daily and you'll just be able to go further. And I started just burning out because I was like, I'm getting up at 5 a.m. to do my Miracle Morning. I have to do it. And then I'd be like, and by the time the afternoon came around, I was done. So I've changed my morning routine. So I wake up when my daughter comes in and wakes me up now. talk about life-changing for energy, like to wake up with the positive like energy of your daughter, just like her voice coming in. That is the greatest alarm clock ever devised. And I mean, I have the privilege because I'm not working. When I'm working, obviously, you gotta have an alarm clock. But when I'm not working and I'm at home, I wake up when she wakes me up.
It's amazing.
It's so good.
All right. The other better life question that I now have shifted to more often is, how do you define, or what would you define as a better life? Like, how does somebody achieve a better life?
That's a great question. And a good, because I did have all the other ones. I've seen the podcast.
Yeah.
This one I didn't know was coming, and I like it.
Yeah.
How would I define a better life? I think the ability to choose who you want to be moment to moment, I think would define like a better life. And being of service in those moments too. I shifted that, like my affirmations for in the morning of like, rather than being about what I can do for me, it's like, what can I do for other people? Even if it's just my daughter or my wife. What choices can I make on a daily basis that improve the lives of others will ultimately lead to a better life for me?
Mm-hmm.
I think that would be the definition. What service to others by your daily choices and actions. I think that'll make your life even better.
Perfect. The reason I like that question, I mean, one is just a good question too, but what I really like is that it makes for a very nice soundbite for Instagram.
Did I get it?
Yeah,
okay,
right?
great.
You did it great, right? Because it's like actual like wisdom. It's a wisdom type question. So like, we can start the clip for an Instagram clip is like right when you start that, and it just sounds really good. I'm sure that's like what Lewis Howes does because he gets so many great like sound bites
for sure.
I think he thinks questions that deliver good sound bites. So
look at you learning.
I'm
from
learning.
Your peers, Lewis.
Yep.
You gotta have Lewis on the show. Have you had?
I know I've not had Lewis, but we are good buddies. So
you should
Lewis.
totally.
Yeah, I love Lewis.
Good podcast.
All right, last question for you. And I think this is interesting for you because you've done a lot with your life already, and you have.
He's just getting
you were
warmed
the
up.
director. You're just getting warmed up. You're the director of the most streamed movie of all time.
Yeah.
That's insane. But I think what's really important is is it Ronan? Ronan?
Yeah,
right?
Ronan. Yeah.
Like, what do you want Ronan to say about you when she's older, talking to her kids or grandkids about her dad?
There was this. I'm going to answer this with a story, and the soundbite will be at the end, or I'll do it again. I was at a barbecue for Memorial Day with my wife and her family, and there was a friend of my wife's stepmother who was there, and I hadn't never met before. But throughout the course of the barbecue, kids are running around, and I was, at 17 months, Ronan is getting into all kinds of things, and I'm very attentive to her and paying attention. And so hours go by, and I'm doing my thing with her. And at the end of the time when the lady was about to leave, she pulled me aside and said, "Hey, I don't want to embarrass you, or I didn't know if I should approach you, but I just wanted to say, I think you're the best dad that I've ever seen."
Wow.
And I was like, that's a huge compliment. Thank you. And she's like, "Well, you're just so attentive, like, and so attuned to your daughter's needs. And I just wanted to tell you that I'm really impressed with that." So if
she told me the same things.
Yeah, well, you are the best dad. I mean, she tells everybody that. She gets father issues. But if my daughter would someday say, he was a great dad.
Yeah.
Whatever that means to her, I think that would just be being present, being supportive, listening, creating an environment for her to be who she is. But if she was to say, he was a great dad, my legacy will be complete. Like, all the rest of the movies, that's great. It'd be great to have hopefully I'm just getting started, have a canon of movies I'd be proud of for her to watch and say, yeah, my dad did this. But if she answers that he was a great dad,
it's a game changer. I think about that. Literally, it's a question I love to go back to because, and I'm sure you're the same way, where you are doing absolutely amazing things. And at the end of the day, if my kids got up and said, "Hey, my dad owned $100 million or $1 billion of real estate at my funeral," I would be disgusted with myself.
Yeah.
What it is for me is I want them to say that my dad loved me and was an incredible dad and cherished me every single day and put me first.
Yeah, because the other stuff is kind of what you did.
Yeah.
On but the saying that you love them and you were there, that's who you are.
Yeah.
And so getting a compliment on who you are is such a much bigger, it just feels better than a compliment on what you've done. And so many times we equate, I think wrongly, success with achievement, as opposed to being there for people that we love and just being, good good human. And that, I've come by that with all kinds of mistakes along the way, but arriving at that and saying like, and a lot of that's having a daughter that's kind of now, she's looking at me as like, this is a great concept somebody said, like, you need to be the man that you want your daughter to marry.
Yeah.
And I was like, holy smokes, that responsibility is huge and profoundly important. Like, nothing else that I do in my life will be as important as fulfilling that role of an example of what a man should be, period. To a woman, like how I treat my wife, like how I treat other people. That's what she's looking at. And she does. They're little sponges, and you guys know, you got kids, like they absorb everything. What you say, what you do. You turn around and she's doing squats because I was, she's caught me working out, or she's walking around like doing this funny dance because I was making fun of somebody, like in jest and like a friend. But I go, wow, she's mimicking everything I do. Do better.
Yeah. It takes exactly. That's awesome. I love that.
All right, man. 2 final wrap-up questions. Number 1, what are you excited about?
Ooh, I'm excited about this. Well, one, being a dad, and my wife is pregnant with our second.
Amazing.
So that is, again, just all these things that I'm doing on the outside, like things I do is one, but this internal family stuff, that's the most exciting to me. So having a second child would be amazing. And on the work side, I'm really excited about, I'm going to give you 3 things. Watch this. I'm excited about this real estate deal, this 29 unit, because it's a new, we didn't really get into, but we can talk after because I want some advice. It's like getting into the how to, because I don't have the cash up front. It's like a bridge loan, private investors, all kinds of different things that I'm working on. But to just start this scaling process, because I think it's a really great deal and I love the people I'm working with. So I'm excited for that to go through. I'm manifesting that closing. And then on the work side, we've got the next movie I'm doing coming up is called Matchbox. Like we're bringing Matchbox cars from Mattel to life in an action adventure movie that really delves into the kind of power of friendship and creative thinking and just being, spontaneous and living in the moment, and not forgetting that imagination and free play are very important to, who we become as humans.
That'll be incredible. Any actors that we would know that are?
Not yet. We've got. That's not true.
I'm available if you need.
Yeah. Well, there's bam. You're both available, and hey, we're great. Skydance, we're good. We've cast.
I will not charge $20 million to be
great.
part of it.
I will.
Hey, never sell yourself short. Yeah, exactly.
I know my worth.
Know what you're worth. Know the market. Know what you're worth.
That's awesome, man. I'm excited for that. All right.
Last question. Where can people find you at? I mean, you've got incredible
you
story.
can, I'm not going to give you my address, but you can, on social. Yeah. Okay, great. On social, it's Sam Hargrave on Instagram. And it's usually where I have videos on YouTube, but I don't have a YouTube channel yet, but it's Instagram. Yep.
Cool.
Sam Hargrave, or at Sam Hargrave is how they do it there, I guess.
Love it.
Yep.
All right, man. Well,
awesome.
Thank you for coming on the show. Thanks for flying all the way across the world to come on. I know it was a long travel day for you.
It was, and totally worth it. Thanks for having me. This was awesome.
It was a blast.
Very cool.
Awesome. 3-way.
Yes.
Boom.
Okay. All right.
Three-way.
Look at that.
We did it.
And that, my people, is the show. Thank you for tuning in. And hey, before you go, if you enjoyed the episode or if you enjoy the show in general, please consider leaving us a rating and review wherever you listen to podcasts. We really do value your feedback, and we read the comments. We make future decisions about topics and guests and everything else. Plus, it helps us reach more people the more reviews we get. And last but not least, please head over to social media. Consider friending and following and subscribing to all that stuff at Better Life, and my personal page at Beardy Brandon on Instagram, YouTube, and everywhere else. Thank you again for listening. I'm honored that you would bring me along on your journey toward building wealth through real estate investing without losing your soul.